A good afternoon, everybody in Irish Breakdown Land. I am Vince D'Addario. That is Brian Driscoll, and my joyous demeanor is because it is Friday. It is a free-for-all mailbag. I'm fired up. It's my favorite day of the week. We just get to dive right into questions, and thanks to Brian setting this up early, our first question came in almost 2 hours ago. Yeah. So people are fired up just like I am. This is awesome. We had a not normal day off yesterday, but it was a chance for everybody to recharge their batteries, which was awesome for both of us.
Speak for yourself.
Well, I had to drive to Chicago, which was great. And let's just put it this way. It's a good thing I live in a smaller town, and I know people live in big towns and big cities and things and consider South Bend small, and it is in the big grand scheme of things, of course. It took me 2 hours to get to where I was going and 3 hours to get back because of traffic. I was about to just go bonkers on somebody. Like, it was not a good look for me. That's why I live where I live, man. It plain and simple. I can't handle that.
We're ready to rock and roll, Vince. So before no, you're good, man. I just
couldn't help it.
I'm so excited. It's great. I know Vince was sad yesterday. I just decided not to do the show because I don't like doing it without Vince. And I had a lot of things going on that I'm going to get to, and I'm going to kind of show off with some exciting news. But first, we have a super chat from my man, Adi Miola. I have to publicly confess my love for this show. Appreciate it, and I promise you that's not why I say your kids are awesome. So they're ballers.
They are.
But look, so we got some exciting things. So part of the reason that I did not do a show yesterday, and part of the reason I've just been so busy the last few days, is we've been working on getting our message board up and rolling.
Right.
And we had a couple options, and I decided to go and have my wife, who does graphic design and web design, build me one so that way I could do it a little bit. If I'm going to pay, I'd rather pay for it than somebody else. All right.
Fair enough.
So we've been working on that. She's been working around the clock. I've been going to bed about 3-4 o'clock in the morning the last 3 nights, and she is not going to bed. I'm going to bed before her. So she has been grinding. Yesterday was doing a lot of testing, then all of a sudden I had something come up. I had to run to Ohio, pick my grandma up, bring her back here. It's just been a crazy 24 hours, but
holy cow,
the message board is live. I have a few friends of mine on it now.
They're going to say there's already posts and topics.
There's already I put a bunch of stuff on there. I have some recruiting intel on there. You can go to it now, and I'll give the site out here in a second, but it's not quite ready yet. There's still some links I have to add, but the posting works, the messaging works. We're just making sure that there's some kinks we have to work out. So if you want to go to it now, you can. I would encourage you to just wait until tomorrow because, I want to, I want it to be perfect. I want it to be done right and all those kind of things, but it is there now. And so we have a monthly, it's a premium board. So you have to be a member to sign up. It's, you can sign up per month. You can sign up for a year, and it gets you access to all, obviously all my content from Irish Breakdown will be on there. I'll be putting some intel that doesn't go anywhere else on there. Things that, there's things that I say I can't say in the podcast because it just needs to be behind a paywall. And so some of those things will be on there. And of course it's going to be a way we can talk. So Vince and I were talking last night. It was like, it's like the shows are over and then it's like, okay, everybody go home. Right. Well, what I think is cool about this is that when the show's over, we can go to the message board and we keep talking about stuff. And so I would love for all of you to be a part of what we're doing with that, but it is not something to where, as I've said before, if you are just more of a YouTube person, then stay here. We're not going away. We're not changing. We're not going to start holding things back that we were otherwise put on YouTube. The things that we put on YouTube, we'll continue to put on YouTube. Our shows aren't going to change. This is now just another forum, another format for us to engage as a community. And so the site is boards.irishbreakdown.com. is what it is. So boards.irishbreakdown.com. Like I said, you can sign up. You have to be a premium member to actually see the content. There is a free board for those of you that just want to be involved, but we're not really pushing that right now, obviously, because we won't be posting on it. We won't be engaging on it. But, I know that not everybody's budget is such that you can afford to do things like that. So, but that is ready to go. And like I said, we're doing some testing. So if you do go sign up now, that's great. Just understand, there's some links that haven't, I have a roster and a schedule and the commit list, and I haven't added the links to those yet, but the board is ready to go if you want to go and pick one of those. And we also have a IB booster club. So we've had people that have asked about, they just want to give us money to support. Well, I don't feel like you just giving me money just to give me money. So what we did is we tied it into the message board. So if you give us a donation beyond what the yearly membership is, that's awesome. We will honor that. And the other thing is people that sign up now, we're working on creating a discount code. So if you sign up monthly, you'll get a 10% discount on your next purchase at the Irish Breakdown store. If you sign up annually, we'll give you a 20, or if you're one of the booster club, we'll give you a 20% discount on your next purchase at the Irish Breakdown store. So we're working on that code. That's kind of the next thing. You will get that once that's ready, but I'll have your email saved. We'll know that you're in there, and when that code is ready, we'll get that to you. So a lot going on. And, and obviously if you want to be it's basically Shamrock Club is people that want to give, $50 to $99 if you want to donate money, and then you'll get the year membership, you'll get the discount and all that kind of stuff. And then if you want to be part of the Blue Club, that is $100 or more. And you get 20% discount off your next purchase. You get all types of, you get the website and all that kind of stuff. You get the message board. And then of course, if you want to be a Gold Club member, you can do, I think she did $200 or more. That's just a one-time donation. It does not, the thing about the donation is it does not automatically renew in a year. Okay. That's a one-time donation and gives you free access for a year to the website. So I'm excited about it. We've been working like crazy to get this done. So I haven't slept in like a week and a half. And, again, it's still a work in progress. It's still a work in progress, but it is ready to go. So it's going to be at boards.irishbreakdown.com. And like I said, if there's issues with it now, understand, I'm giving you, I'm not putting it out on Twitter. I'm not putting it on the website yet. I'm not putting it on Facebook. I'm just doing it with our family right here, our crew right here. If you want to go to it, just understand we plan on working on it through the weekend to really get it rocking and rolling. Yeah. But if you do want to jump on now, you can. And if you want to check out that recruiting intel on there, you can. So that is it. So Vince, I am ready. I've talked too much. Let's dive into some questions because we're going to lose a bunch of these if we don't get rocking.
I know, right? So yeah, that's exciting news. That's way more exciting than my drive to Chicago. So just want to throw that out there. So we're going to jump right into questions and comments. We've got some good ones. I was kind of reading through some of them while I was waiting to start the show, and we're jumping right in here. So AJ has the first comment of the day. He says, "You said you will feel better about Notre Dame's chances with Nwankpa the longer it takes him to make a decision. Do you feel the opposite way with Sneed? Thought he would be in the class by now."
No, Jalen Sneed is my stance on him has not changed. What I would say is I would just be patient. Okay, I expect next week to be a fun week. All right, can we just leave it at that? And then Jalen's going to make his decision. And as I said before, I still got to push the trash can out of the way.
Very smooth. I can see it like moving out of the
I was going to yawn and try that move like the old movie theater move back in the day.
Oh, that was good.
But I feel good about where Notre Dame is with Jalen Sneed. I understand why he hasn't made a public announcement or commitment yet. And my knowledge of that gives me no concern. So you know what I'm going to say, Vince? Let it play out. We got another super chat. I'm so Matthew Edwards, Matt. I'm humbled by this. I mean, just with Audie and his and publicly confessing his love for our show. And Matthew, I needed this today, guys. Just the not the money, but the support. The fact that what it means behind it. But Matthew, thank you so much for the super chat. And he says, "What lessons, if any, has the coaching staff taken from the Dracovic debacle that might inform their handling and development of Buckner going forward?" I don't.
The coaching staff think it was a debacle.
I don't think that they view it as a debacle.
Right.
Exactly. I think that's the problem. I think that where I would say is I think every experience is a learning experience for a young coach. And so I think with Tommy, I would imagine, and I don't know this for a fact because I don't talk to Coach Reese, and I would imagine the experience, his life experience around coaching. His dad was a coach, his dad was a recruiting coordinator and a scout. I would imagine Tommy looks at everything as a learning experience, and I would imagine he's taking some lessons from that. But I don't think they view that they did anything wrong. I think it was more about maybe I should have pushed Phil more and done those type of things. So I don't think that they are necessarily taking lessons from it in the manner in which you and I think that they should. But I think the other thing with Buckner, the big difference is Tommy Reese did not recruit Phil Dracovic, and neither did Chip Long. and they did recruit Tyler Buckner. And so I think there's more of an investment in Tyler Buckner. And they also understand that quarterback is very important. So I think in that regards, I would imagine the one lesson that we'll see is they're going to take more emphasis on, we got to make sure we're coaching the entire depth chart at quarterback, not so much just the starter. And if they can learn that, if that's the only lesson that they take from it, then that's a win for me.
And, you make a good point there that he wasn't recruited by the staff. That
it shouldn't matter, but it matters.
Completely agree with you that it should not matter. But when it's your guy versus somebody that's not your guy, I can see that line of thinking. I don't agree with it, but I see that line of thinking, and it makes me understand it. Again, I don't agree with it in any way, but I see it. And you're right. Now the quarterbacks that are on the roster are Tommy Rees's guys. You know what I mean? Like, he has an investment. And when it's your guy,
and it's more, and what it means by your guy, it's more about your style of quarterback that you feel comfortable coaching with. I don't think Tommy Rees knew how to coach Phil Jacovic. I don't, because he's a guy that you just kind of like, spin it and like let it go. You can't harness it. It just like let him go play. And I don't know if he knew how to do that. We got another super chat from Brandon. Brandon says, thoughts on the July 27th recruiting barbecue Notre Dame is throwing. You think the staff can make a big enough impact without rolling out fancy cars and all the trophies? Well, they're going to roll out the trophies, okay? And they'd be foolish not to. They're not going to be rolling out fancy cars, I would imagine. But no, I think this is a phenomenal move. And there's already a lot of big time names already talking about coming. Ryan Yates, who we have a story up. Luke Henley, who I just hired as a recruiting analyst at Notre Dame at Irish Breakdown. He's just getting started. He's a young guy. He's in college. He's learning. This is sort of an internship for him. But he talked to Ryan Yates, who's a top 100 player. I believe he's in the top 50 according to Rivals. Who's a cornerback from Texas. And guess what? He's 6'2". He's long. Shocker, right?
Yeah, shock.
But I think he's going to be there that weekend. There's some other top players that have already talked about being there this weekend. This staff is rolling right now. And do I think that they'll be able to make a big enough impact without rolling out fancy cars? Heck yes, because that's not who Notre Dame is. That's not why these kids are showing up. That's not why they have the number 2 class in the country. Notre Dame is selling what they should sell, which is we don't have to, blow smoke. We don't have to pull out the fancy cars and all that stuff to mask what our program is actually about or not about. They own who they are. And if you don't want to be a part of it, then this isn't the place for you. And I'm good with that. You just got to make sure you're getting the best possible players that fit that and being willing to battle for those guys. So I love that barbecue. I think it's great. I think it's just they could have easily said, look, we had a ton of 23 kids on campus in the summer. We had, top players from across the country. We're good. We're going to focus on our team. And that's what they've done in the past. The fact that they're doing another big recruiting event like a week before the fall camp starts tells me this staff and Brian Kelly and Mike Elston and the Marcus Freeman and Tommy Rees and the rest of the staff understand this is how we win a championship. We got to recruit better. We got to get those final. And like I've said for years, they're just, especially the last 3-4, they're just a couple guys a class away. That's it.
I agree.
And this is the kind of thing you do. And so I don't know if you can sense the passion that I'm excited about what we're seeing and all the things I'm hearing about Brian Kelly, because y'all know I've been a little critical of Brian Kelly's recruiting them a few years. So to see him doing that and to hear from source after source after source that he is getting after it is really encouraging to me. And it makes it a fun, exciting time. And then just the next thing, now there's a barbecue coming. There's this kid coming in, that kid coming in, and it's got to get you excited. We have another super chat. Thanks.
They're lining up. My
man, Mr. Adamiola says, I know me. I have to lose, sending another $10 because I need to top Matthew Edwards, who just did a super chat for $25. My man. My man.
That is awesome. I like the competition. I'm down with the competition.
I appreciate all y'all so much.
That's so great.
So much. Jim K has a super chat too. Also, Jim, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Just wanted to show appreciation for the great content you provide. Keep up the great work. And you know what? The only thing I can promise and the only thing I can guarantee is that we're going to keep working hard and we're going to keep doing the best we can and putting out the best content we can. I'm excited today. And just all y'all and just being here and just, it's amazing. We got another one. Felix Fournier, my man. Hi, guys. Do you expect Freeman's let him play approach to also influence the offensive philosophy? My opinion is that recent QB play was too risk-averse for the offense to produce at an elite level. I think you nailed it, Felix. I think the risk-averse thing is absolutely something that we need to discuss when we talk about how are they going to coach up Jack Cohn.
Mm-hmm.
You know, are they going to let him, hey, it's okay to make a mistake. Hey, you know what? You got strip sacked that one time, and, you know, we got to correct that. We got to coach that. Hey, you can't hold the ball that long. You got to fix that. But then there's the overreaction to it, to where then he's afraid to make a mistake, or he's afraid to now push the ball downfield. And you can't do that. You have to be willing to it's, you know what? You're going to throw a pick every now and then. You're going to lose the ball. But if that's being countered by we're making a bunch of plays, then that's how you're going to be successful, right? I mean, well, didn't Deshaun Watson, like the year that he won a championship, didn't he throw like plus 10 picks? And I remember I'm looking it up now. He threw like a bunch of picks that year, threw 17 picks that year that they won the national championship. And I remember the media got just losing their minds about, oh, he's turning the ball over so much and this, and this. And I'm thinking, but he's making a million plays. And if you get rid of one, then you're going to get rid of the other. You can't play that way. Now, there were times Deshaun got a little bit too loose with the ball. And I'm not saying I'm comfortable with Jack Cohn throwing 17 picks this year. You know what I mean? But I'll say this, if he also throws for 4,500 yards, and which Deshaun Watson did, and 41 touchdowns, and also goes out and, you know, rushes for 9 touchdowns and 629 yards and leads Notre Dame to a national championship, then you can throw 17 picks. Okay. But the point is that Deshaun never lost confidence. You can clean up the picks. You can say, hey, look, we got to protect the ball a little bit better here. You know, here's why you made the mistake. Let's not make that mistake again. But without just making it so the culture on offense for the last few years is so, if you made a mistake, it was just, you know, lose it. And that's where Coach Reese has got to kind of, hey, you're the offensive coordinator, man. You've got to set the emotional tone for this football team. You can't flip out if a guy makes a bad read or loses or throws a bad ball in practice. You got to be calm. They're going to be looking at you when times get tough, right? And like you look at Clark Lee. When stuff went down, Clark Lee's demeanor never changed. You watch Mike Elson on the sideline. Demeanor hardly ever changed. The time you get fired up, it's an encouragement. Hey, let's go. Let's get going. Let's roll. Whereas Brian Van Gorder would kirk out and lose his mind whenever something didn't go right. And then Brian Kelly get on him. And so to me, you've got to be the emotional leader. They're going to feed off of you. And so if you're correcting mistakes, but also understand, hey, look, I like where your head was at on that play. I love the aggressiveness, but here's the deal. You got to get that. If you're going to make that throw, you got to throw it a second sooner. Right. And I remember talking about this with somebody when they were watching Phil Dracovich's first game. And he made a bad I think threw an interception on a corner route. And somebody said, well, what happened there? You know, I said, no, what here's the coaching you do there. You say, I love the read. I love the throw. You threw it 2 seconds too late. Right. So you don't flip out. You say, you don't make the mistake again. You correct it. But next time, make that throw again. Just get it out sooner. And if you can't get it out sooner, then you take the check down. So the timing part of it. And so those are the things that I want to see from the quarterback play, to where you don't want them just going after throwing picks every other throw. Right. But you also don't want them being so afraid to make a mistake, to what he says, risk averse, that you then lose your side. And then Matthew Edwards with the hat tip to Mr. Adamiola. So the game is now tied. So
the game
appreciate all y'all so
as
much.
They say. That's great. Well, I'm going to go and jump right back to the top, Brian. Let's see here. Coach Koch. Koch?
I would imagine so.
I'm going to go Koch. He goes, I know I'm super early here, but I'm super excited for today's show. He's got a hypothetical. Would you take Cone over Florida State's Milton at quarterback? Also, if you had to bet right now about Pope's commitment, where do you think he goes? And then he follows it up with, as always, I appreciate your hard work and dedication. You guys are awesome, and keep up the good work. God bless.
Let's back to that question. So for Notre Dame's offense, let's assume that Mackenzie Milton is 100% healthy.
That's a big assumption, but yes.
For Notre Dame's offense, I would still take Jack Cohn. Because I think look, Notre Dame had no problem with Tommy or Ian Book scrambling, but I don't think they wanted him to scramble as much as he did. They never said it publicly, but a lot of his scrambles were because he wasn't making the right read on plays that were open. And I would rather hit that 25-yard corner route than scramble for 12.
Right.
I just would. And I think that's when this offense is working at its best, as a quarterback can just distribute the ball, get it going. Now, can McKenzie do some of those things? Sure, but McKenzie's a little bit of a freelancer. So it just depends on the kind of offense that I was running. For Mike Norvell's offense, if I could pick between Jack Cohn or Mackenzie Milton, I'd take Mackenzie Milton, because I think that's what he needs more for that offense. So with anything, it's kind of like there's this quarterback that's going to Georgia. So we released our top 25 rankings, and I got to do the 1 through 5 today. But for SI All-American, and I had a role in kind of with those rankings, and there was a kid named Gunnar Stockton who's going to Georgia. Short, stumpy kid, good arm, but he's ran for 1,500 yards last year. He's more of a run-throw guy than a throw-run guy, if that makes sense. And I looked at him and I had him ranked 11th, but then I had to fit okay, but how about the scheme fit? Well, he's going to Georgia. He doesn't fit that offense at Georgia. And so I dropped him, because that's part of the evaluation process. Where if he was going to play for Gus Malzahn at UCF, I'm like, man, this kid's going to be a monster in college. You know what I mean? Because scheme fit matters. Not every quarterback is ideally suited for every offense, right? I think Trevor Lawrence is a great quarterback. Would you want him running your triple option offense at Navy? Probably not, right?
Could he do it?
You have to find that he'd still do it, still win. Well, but better yet, how about would you want Jimmy Clausen running that offense?
Right.
No, you wouldn't, right?
No, I wouldn't.
So you have to find the right scheme fit. And so for me, I think for Notre Dame, I think that Jack Cohn is the better fit because McKenzie's a little bit more of an off-platform, off-schedule, freelancing kind of guy. Jack is more of a get your drop, get the ball out to your playmakers. Now if you could get McKenzie was a little bit of a cleaner pocket passer, which is what I think Tyler Buckner is, then I would take McKenzie that way. And that's why I think Tyler Buckner is sort of the best of both worlds if he can develop as a player. And then the second part of the question, I'm sorry, the Jake Pope commitment.
Yes.
So I'm trying to think what I can. So I put some intel on the message board that you'll be able to check out this weekend if you sign up for it. But I don't think that Notre Dame and Jake Pope are going to work out. Okay, I don't see that one finishing. And a couple things is, remember when he visited and everybody got excited about all the great things he's saying about Notre Dame? Do you remember my response was? I was like, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm buying that because he kind of said the same thing about North Carolina, and he kind of then went and said the same thing about Ohio State and said the same thing about Alabama. Just strikes me as the kind of kid that's going to say whatever he thinks you want to hear. I don't think that Notre Dame is necessarily as high on his board as some people think it is. I don't think he's as high on Notre Dame's board right now as some people think it is. I think that they would like to finish the class off with different players. I don't think they haven't told him no, but I don't think they're necessarily pushing to get him to say yes either, if that makes sense. And then the reasons behind it, you can check out on the message board, but I don't normally give into those kind of things, but I don't know where he's going to go. I don't think it's going to be Notre Dame.
It was more than I thought you were going to give. I'll say that.
Well, to me, this was the first test case of making sure that people know that, hey, we're not going to just start saying, oh, you got to check it out on the message board. That would be super annoying, really super annoying, right? And it would tick me off. And I don't want people to think that we're going to do that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Nolan jumping in, he says, how do you feel about the hiring of Dre Brown? Is this a sign that Kelly is trying to fix the recruiting issues on offense or just a typical hire that most teams make?
It's definitely not the latter because Notre Dame hasn't had this position before.
Correct.
This is a new position. Now, how do I feel about the hiring of Dre Brown specifically? I have no opinion. 4 months ago, Dre Brown was working in the private sector. Wasn't that long ago, a year or two ago, he was playing college football. He has no experience doing this at all. He was at Tennessee for 2 months before Notre Dame hired him. Okay, so about him, I have no opinion. But here's where I do have a strong opinion. I don't know anything about him, good or bad. But from what I'm told, what they were looking for, I have to think that something about him, something that they were told by somebody else, something that they found out in an interview process, something about him said, hey, this kid has no experience. But you know what my stance is on coaching, Vince. If you got the chops, you got the chops. And I've met coaches that have been coaches for 30 years and they couldn't coach their way out of a wet paper bag. And I've met guys that have been in the business for a couple years and they're pretty good. I thought that I kind of had a little bit of that. I had a lot of success very early on because, if you learn from your mentors and all that kind of stuff, I think if you got the chops, you got the chops, right? And I said this about Clark Lee when people, he's never been a coordinator. If he's got the chops, he's got the chops, John Tenuta was a coordinator for 20 years and I thought that was a terrible hire. Brian Van Gorder had been a coordinator in the NFL. It's a terrible hire.
The Broyles
you
Award winner.
You can coach, right? This is not a coaching position. This is going to give him a chance to learn. And eventually I thought I read on Football Scoop that he wants to get into coaching. This is sort of an avenue for him to get into coaching, but this allows him to also kind of use his personality, the fact that he's younger. He was recently a player to maybe do for the offensive recruiting what Chad Bowden's doing for defensive recruiting. So I don't know a thing about Dre Brown, but if what I'm told about him is legit and if the fact that they're making this hire, it's basically a new position. tells me that this is another example that Brian Kelly's pushing all the chips to the center of the table, right? Hey, we're close. And if we want to get to that level, we got to do it, right? Now's the time to do it. I'm going to be here, 3 more years, right? 2024, right? 4 more years at the most, right? Maybe less. Pushing all the chips on the table, man. It's time to go get it done. And if we got to go create new positions and do this to get those couple kids a year, then that's what we're going to do. And if Dre Brown's the right guy for that, that's awesome. But I just can't speak to Dre personally because I don't know him. It's the same reason I'm hesitant to say anything about Chris O'Leary. I don't know a thing about Chris O'Leary. I've never met Chris O'Leary. I've never talked to Chris O'Leary. All I can tell you is what other people tell me. And the people that I know and respect who have an opinion about Chris O'Leary, it's a very high opinion. And so I'll tell you that, but I can't tell you anything about Chris O'Leary because I don't know him. Same thing about Dre Brown. I don't have an opinion of Dre Brown personally because I don't know him. But people that I've talked to and just the role specifically without his name, just what they're trying to do, I think is encouraging. It's just another example that Brian Kelly is saying, look, this is what's needed. Let's go get it done. And we're committed. And I heard from somebody last night to follow up on a conversation we had recently about nutrition and all those type of things.
Yeah.
And not only they hired a nutritionist, but they're also doing another thing that I'm not going to say what it is because I'm not sure if I have the ability to do that. But it just gave me the excitement that, you know what, they do recognize the things that are missing in the program relative to other places. And they're making hires and they're creating positions and they're expanding their staff in a way that says we got to get there. And that's something that, to me, excites me. And it's why I've been a little bit more positive in recent weeks than I had been because I am hearing a lot of things that are saying, okay, I've been complaining about that. I've been complaining about that. I've been complaining about that. He's stepping up and doing it. So I'm encouraged. I'm excited about it. And as long as it continues, I'll still be happy.
Kevin Thomas is kind of going off of that. He says, going off the Dre Brown, how much of this hire is a reflection of what Chad Bowen has done on defense? That is getting a person in a position for the offense to have an impact that Bowen has had on defensive recruiting. As an aside, how much would you say Bowen has impacted the defense?
And it's Bowden is actually the name. I mean, has he impacted it? I mean, to the standpoint of, are they getting kids because of him directly? No. Is his role in all of this a vital piece to them getting the kids they're getting? Yes. And that's what I've always said, Vince. It's not just one great coach. It's not just Marcus Freeman. It's Marcus Freeman was step one. And then putting him with Mike Mickens and Mike Elston was step 2. And then making Mike Elston the recruiting coordinator, step 3. Step 4 is bringing in Chad Bowden. It's all part of the process that's leading to a great recruiting operation.
Yes.
And
that's something we've complained about in the past.
They've had great individual recruiters in the past, but this is more about an operation. And that's the exciting thing about what they're doing is it's the whole operation. I mean, even something that we don't talk a lot about, but Bill Reese coming in and being part of the back office where he's, finding some kids. So when you see a guy like Darren Agu, who's a 3-star, and then you see you say, oh, hey, I know the people behind this decision to go for him. I trust them and I trust my own eyes. So this kid can play. I don't care what Rivals or ESPN or 247 or anybody else thinks. I see it. They see it. I know the people behind it. I know Bill Reese's resume as an evaluator of talent. I can feel comfortable with that. And that's all part of the operation and the expansion of what Brian Kelly's done over the years. That's hopefully going to culminate in a really fun and exciting next few years.
Han Solo has a long one, so hold your water here, Brian. He says, you guys have talked a lot about the up-and-coming stars on defense and ones that are returning, but I'd like to hear your take on sophomore Marist Liufau. From the game last year against North Carolina, he looked very impressive to me, and he looked like he had great speed coming downhill. He said, just started listening to the show earlier this week, and I love it.
Well, I appreciate that. You got any more?
That's it.
Okay.
That's it. I had to click like 4 different ones, so.
I love it. Well, first of all, if I like Star Wars, so, you already got me with Han Solo, so we're there. So I like Marist a lot. I do. I think he's athletic. I think he's a unique player because he actually started as in his career, like as a freshman and sophomore in high school, he was actually a cornerback.
Really?
Because he was he's skinny now. Imagine what he was like as a freshman in high school, point. Right? And he's pretty athletic, and that's why he's really good in coverage. The thing about Marist is he's got length, he's got athleticism, he's explosive, he's got more power than you'd expect from a kid that skinny.
Yeah.
I think he can run, he can cover. The thing is he's just got to be harnessed in a little bit. And I think he's still a little bit too much into he's going to make a few too many mistakes. Now, I personally would have rather had him making mistakes and making plays than another guy who didn't make mistakes but made no plays. But I think that you're going to see him play this year. I think him and Shane Simon are going to be a nice combo. I was told that Marist didn't necessarily have a great spring, so he's going to have to bounce back and have a great fall, which is, it's spring. It's part of the process.
Not everybody's going to have a great spring.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's going to get another crack at it. He's going to keep working hard because it's the one thing I've heard about Marist is he works his tail off. I think he's going to find a niche in this offense. I think you could see him as a rusher. I think you could see him in some nickel packages as a cover guy. He's going to have a role. And from what I'm told, Marcus Freeman wants to throw waves at people, as we've talked about, not just at the D-line. So I think we're going to see 6-7 linebackers playing on a weekly basis. And I think that's also something that's going to be great for recruiting. Hey, how can you play that many corners? Watch. Watch. And you recruited 7 linebackers in 2 years. If they go out and get 3 linebackers next year, for example, and let's say they get Jalen Snead. You guys recruited 7 linebackers in 2 years. How can you play that many guys? Watch. And I think that's what's exciting about what he's going to do. But it's also why you need that depth. So even if you're not a starter, you're still going to have a very important role in what they're doing. And I think Marist can be that guy for the things that he talked about. He's some speed. He's got some power. He just has to be more disciplined. That's the big thing. And he's also got to get better at block destruction. You can't be an inside linebacker if you can't get off blocks. And I think that's something that Marist, and that's more of a strength technique thing than anything.
Coleman Smith, any word on Schrouth? Is it trending back in Notre Dame's favor?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily trending back in Notre Dame's favor. I just think that Notre Dame is making this a tough decision for him. And I've said with him the same thing that I have said about Xavier Nwakpa. I think early on, my thought was the longer it played out for Schrouth, the worse it was for Notre Dame. And I was right because he was trending to Wisconsin. But now I feel like the reverse has happened, that if he makes a decision, 2 weeks ago, it would have been Wisconsin. Brian, and I'm told the 2 people driving this, and this is a little nugget that's in my recruiting intel, and I'm going to throw a little bone to everybody now, but I kind of mentioned this in the past, but Brian Kelly and Tommy Rees have really, really driven this one. And I do think that Notre Dame is in a much better place today than they were a couple weeks ago. They got to close. But what I'm told is this is a pet project of Brian Kelly and Tommy Rees. So if they get this one done, it's just another example that Brian Kelly is not playing around on the recruiting trail this year, which is a very exciting and welcome change.
Hey, Bob 157 says, Brian and Vince, did you watch the interview between Chris Zorich and Coach Freeman? I highly recommend. The dude gets it. He also goes into a little detail about the process of choosing between Notre Dame and LSU. I personally did not see. I saw Chris put it out on Twitter last night.
You were gone all day yesterday. I had to leave. I had to go out of town yesterday, get my grandmother, bring her back. I got back last night like midnight, and then I had articles to write and finishing up the website. So I have not had a chance to see it. I will watch it because I like listening to Marcus Freeman talk and break down football, and he's a sharp guy.
Yeah, and I'm interested to hear about the process between Notre Dame and LSU. I'm interested to hear a little bit behind the curtain on that. So yes, that is something that is on my list of things.
And if you don't know, Chris Zorich actually has a YouTube channel. So if you're not familiar with it, go find it because he interviews a lot of former players and people like that. So if you haven't found it, go find it. He doesn't have a huge following, I don't believe, but let's maybe we can direct some traffic to that because he was one of my favorite players growing up.
James Kearney says, when do you think subbing is good? I've thought CBK has kept Coach Brian Kelly is probably what that is, right?
Yes.
Has kept the first string in too long at times and felt unwilling to play the second string. Even when he did, the QB rarely threw the ball. If we're talking just the quarterback position,
that's a different deal. That's not
different
subbing.
Conversation.
Yeah, that's not subbing. That's just putting the backups in.
Right.
I think subbing has been an issue, and subbing is, in 2018, Miles Boykin and Chase Claypool played about 90+% of the snap. I think it was like between 89 and 91. I can't like they both had different numbers, but like one was around 89, and the other one was like 90.5, something like that. Percentage of the receiver snaps.
That's
that
year.
And that's a huge problem. I don't care how good you are at receiver. You need to have fewer snaps because, again, you're going to be fresher when the season goes on. But then you're also not developing your younger players. And, again, am I saying that Braden Lindsey should have taken 25 snaps a game away from Chris Finker, Chase Claypool? No. 5, 7. Same with Lawrence Keys. Kevin. That's it. It's like 5 to 10 snaps a game from your backups. on top of what the couple snaps are getting now. And the other problem is, and we've seen this a lot at receiver, especially in 2019, when they put a backup in, if Joe Wilkins went in the game or if another guy went in the game, they would never throw to him.
They were running the ball or throwing away from them.
They were, or they were usually just blocking.
Yeah,
so you can kind of get a tell, like, okay, the couple of second string receivers are in. Let's load the box and stop the run, because they're not going to throw a post wheel concept with Joe Wilkins and whoever the other backup receiver was. So it gives you tells. You got to be able to put them in. You got to put them in position where they're running things that they're comfortable in, and if they're open, you got to throw them the ball. I think those are the things you got to do. Defensively, we've seen it a lot more on defense. I mean, Clark Lee rotated a lot up front. I mean, the Notre Dame defensive line, especially, really in 2017, they didn't rotate as much because they had, Tungavaloa and Kurt Heinz were just true freshmen. They, behind them it was like Brandon T. Awesome, and it wasn't necessarily guys that they were comfortable playing. They rotated a lot at end that year in 2017, but not 2018, or not at D tackle. 2018, they rotated a lot more. You had the two. You had Jason Adamiola was in the rotation that year. You had the two Tungavaloa and Tungavaloa got hurt. And then you had Heinisch, and then, of course, you had your starters were Jonathan Bonner and Jerry Tillery. You went 4 deep, sometimes 5 at defensive end that year. And ever since then, they've just thrown waves at you defensively. Linebacker rotating has been, little hit or miss. We saw more of it last year with Bo Bauer and Drew White, and then also Shane Simon and Marist Liufau. And I think we'll see more of that this year. I don't know how much we're going to see in the secondary. That's one area where I'm a little curious if they're going to rotate as much. And there's some positions, honestly, that it's not ideal to rotate. I'm not like, I would hate the idea of throwing like the second line in on the third series of the game. Hey, second offensive line, we're playing Wisconsin, get in there. No, I'm not doing that. Now, when I rotate the right tackle like I did in 2017, if it's the right situation,
that's different.
Sure,
that's different.
But you practice that. I mean, it's just, and it's just that one guy, and so I'm not a big fan of subbing that. I'm not a big fan of subbing out the quarterback. I'm not a huge fan of subbing out cornerbacks, to be honest with you, because I think part of the being effective there is you got to learn a receiver's tells, and you only do that from experience. And if you're rotating every other series with another corner, it can be difficult for both of them to kind of learn, okay, he's setting me up for a double move here, or I know he's going to be breaking off somehow, because when he's running a go route, he has more of a forward lean. When he's going to try to break me off, he's more up. And some receivers, if he's going to try to beat me vertical, he's more of a high leaner. But if he's trying to set me up, he gets an exaggerated forward lean. And I've watched from film when first quarter I saw this, and I know what he's going to do now, right? But if you're not playing every series and you're not consistently getting playing time at that particular position, you can maybe be a little late to learn those tells. And so some positions I don't love rotating a ton. Safety's a little different because you're not doing as much man coverage. But if you're playing a lot of man outside, I like the idea of having your corners primarily be those guys. And then maybe like every third series you work a guy in or something like that. But it also depends on each position. That's a great question.
Yeah,
great question,
it is a great question. I just wanted to kind of expand on that a little bit more. I think I don't believe they subbed enough at the running back position last year. I think Chris Tyree should have had a lot more snaps than he did, as opposed to just coming in at the end of the game. Or
he should have minimum got 4 to 5 carries a game.
Yeah, absolutely. So running back was an issue for me. Obviously, wide receiver was an issue, and specifically to the quarterback thing, I believe that they should have taken the quarterback out earlier and put a new quarterback in with the rest of the first team, so he could actually run the offense. And
part of the problem with that, Vince, was they weren't putting teams away.
Well, and that's also part of the problem. So that's part of the bigger picture issue. But yeah, if you're trying to develop your talent, you need to get them in when the game still matters.
And let them run the offense.
Let them run it. Don't just let them hand off.
They did that early in 2019 with Phil Dracovic, and he made plays.
Right.
Remember his first career throw was a bomb over the top of the field to Braden Lindsey, hit him perfectly in stride, And then after the Michigan game, they stopped letting him run the offense. And I have my reasons for why I think that is. But early in the season, they let him play, and he made plays. I mean, I think he led him on a touchdown drive like 5 of the first times he got in the game. Yeah. I think he led Notre Dame on a touchdown drive. And then they let Brandon Clark in the game. He threw a little screen pass. Braden Lindsey went for a touchdown.
Yeah.
You got to give him a chance to play. But then later in the year, they stopped doing that. They basically just, put him in there to hand
let
off.
Him hang it up. Yeah. You want to grab that super chat, Brian?
Yeah.
Another one.
Yeah. And then there was a question that Michael Scheller had right before that about the barbecue I wanted to get to. Yeah.
Okay. We talked about the barbecue.
Yeah. I just wanted to kind of say a little something about not yet. I'm going to do the super chat real quick. But David Carpenter says the Zorch interview with Freeman gave me goosebumps at times and made me want to sign up to play for him. I can see why he's having success. Let's go. And I think the more he talks and the more Notre Dame fans get, like, here's the thing. So I've been in the let's let him coach a game first category, and I still am there. Can we just enjoy him as the defensive coordinator for a game before we start talking about his head coach? But the thing that's funny is Notre Dame fans haven't really heard him talk a lot.
Right.
When you hear him talk and you hear him do interviews and you hear, like, you know, maybe if we're going to get some stuff from NBC where they got him on the sidelines talking to the team, Notre Dame fans are going to be like, that's got to be the next guy. I mean, it's going to happen.
It's absolutely going to happen.
Vince, if you're around him for 5 minutes, he's just one of those guys that's like, I really wish I wasn't old and out of shape and slow, because I would love to play for this guy.
Well, during the spring when he was allowed to talk to the media, and I listened to all the coaches talk and whatever, but when he was talking for what I was like, I was riveted with what he had to say, and it's not necessarily what he's saying; it's the manner in which he says it. It's just
he's got a quiet confidence.
He is engaged.
Like, he's not like that charismatic. Like, hey, he's not that. He's just he's intelligent.
Yeah,
he's real thoughtful, like Clark Lee is, and what he's going to say. But I think he's even better. He's got a little bit more charisma than Clark Lee did. I love Coach Lee, but he was very. Though. Clark Lee was like a guy I thought, like, I want to put him like in a Carnegie and give him some glasses and say, okay, go teach my philosophy class, which is a compliment to Clark Lee because he was an intellectual.
Yes.
And I think Marcus Freeman is also very intelligent and very thoughtful. I mean, just some of the things he says and does that I hear from people that are like, man, this guy thinks deep. You don't get a lot of D coordinators like that. A lot of D coordinators are like, usually it's offensive coordinators are like the really unique personalities, and the defensive coordinators are like meatheads that just are like, let's go run through a wall, Brent Venables, and I love Brent Venables, but you get the point that I'm making, right? And
I do. Yes.
I think this new breed of defensive coordinator that we're seeing, and Dave Aranda, is that way, and Clark Lee is that way, and Marcus Freeman is that way, where they're a little bit more intellectual and they're a little bit more thoughtful and calm. I think is a trend that we're seeing, and those guys are going to become head coaches because you can't just be that bang your head against the wall guy and then go be a head coach. Otherwise, you're going to be at Orgeron, And that worked when you hired Joe Brady, but I don't know if that's the long-term plan that you want to go with, right?
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers. But the point is, I think the more he talks and the more people see him and talk to him, the calls for him to be the coach in waiting are just going to grow. And I'm going to repeat again. If they do a coach in waiting, I hope they don't make it public. I don't want them to make it public because I don't think that's good for the program. If you want to do it behind the scenes. Let it be a gentleman's agreement, contractual agreement between the head coach and the AD. But it's going to create all types of problems. And then every time they lose a game or every time something doesn't go right or the offense struggles and the defense plays great, it's get Brian Kelly out of there. And that's not going to be good for the program.
Nope.
If they do, I would like for them to do that if Marcus Freeman shows his chops. But I hope that it's something that's done behind the scenes and doesn't. We've seen it fail. We saw it with Will Muschamp at Texas. I mean, we've seen this over and over again, and it rarely works out well. And if you look at what Bob Stoops did, Bob Stoops just kind of hired Lincoln Riley, let him do a great job. There's those calls, and then when Bob Stoops felt it was time for him to step away, he stepped away, and it was like, here you go. This is my guy. And I think that's the way that
didn't he do it like right before fall camp? It was
and it was his situation was a little different. I don't think he played it that way. I just think he realized, like, we're getting ready for fall camp, and I'm not really necessarily fired up about being here. So you want to pull that question up from
got it right here. It says, "Happy Friday, Vince and Brian. Can you talk about the big barbecue recruiting event that is supposed to take place at the end of the month and the expected visitors so far? Thanks."
My understanding is this is going to be primarily a 2023 event.
I figured, yeah.
And like I said, Ryan Yates, we had a story about him on our site. It's going to be there. I've got a couple other kids. Mike, this is going to be an evolving list over the next couple of weeks. And there's going to be kids that are going to be on there now that are going to end up not being able to come. And they're going to decide, well, I can't come now. I'm going to wait a month and come for the first game or something like that. So I would, we'll create a list on the site and we'll just kind of add to it as it comes and evolves. But right now the list isn't so much as important as just that they're doing it.
Yeah, and especially the timing of when they're doing it. It's literally going to be a week before fall camp opens. Right. I mean, that's usually people are wanting to spend the last moments with their families and things of that nature. So the timing of it is what speaks to me as to how deep they are into recruiting and how important they believe that it is.
Old Grim with the super chat, $5. Thank you, my very, very much, Old Grim. And he said, I just got my IB hat today. Fits perfectly. That is awesome. I'm glad.
That's great. More of these to go around. That's for sure.
Brandon says, not let me send super chats right now. Oh, sure. Okay. Yep. Okay, Brandon, whatever you say.
That's great. Oh, that's great. Here's a quick one. Coleman says, what is the too deep going into the fall looking like at the secondary, in the secondary?
Well, right now it's going to be just a 4-man secondary, right? So we're going to go 2 linebackers and a rover, and then 4 DBs. It's going to be a boundary corner is going to be right now, as of right now, is going to be Cam Hart. And my understanding is Ramon Henderson, and then the two freshmen, Ryan Barnes and Philip Riley, are going to be battle for there. Of the 2 freshmen, if one of those guys emerges over the other, then the other guy will most likely move to the field position or nickel, or because they love both of those guys. To the field, it's going to be Clarence Lewis with Tariq Bracy behind him. And then after that, it's going to be the other freshman. It's going to be JoJo Johnson and Chance Tucker. And I'm told that Chance Tucker has been really impressive so far in workouts. That they love Chance Tucker, and they're very excited. Because I actually talked to somebody the other day, and I said, hey, when I saw Chance, I thought Chance was a really good player, but I didn't see the track speed translate just the way that they had him play. Am I missing this? Am I off? And he's like, yeah, you're off. That kid can flat out run.
Yeah, you're
because
off.
It was this thing. I said, look, I said this when I was like, I've said before, I think Chance is one kid that's going to make my ranking of him look really bad because he makes a ton of plays. He's really sound. He's really effective, but I just don't see the physical tools to translate just the way he plays. And sometimes that happens, but I'm just like, man, this kid makes a lot of plays for someone that doesn't flash elite athleticism. And then we didn't get to see him play as a senior.
True.
But so I've always kind of had this like, man, I have a feeling Chance is going to make me look stupid, with that ranking I have of him. And I was told, I don't know if he's going to make you look stupid, but he can really run. So that's exciting. That's because I always knew he had the intelligence. I always knew he had the length. Could he run like you need a guy at Notre Dame to run? So he's another guy to keep an eye on. And then some of those guys are going to kind of play some nickel and things like that. Safety wise, it's going to be the boundary corner or safety is going to be Houston Griffith. The field safety is going to be Kyle Hamilton. I've been told there's going to be some interchangeableness there. It's not just always locked in there. And then behind him, it's going to be DJ Brown. And then the other one is a battle between guys like KJ Wallace, Litchfield Ajavon, and then the freshman. I would imagine, my understanding is Kerry G is going to be more of a field guy. So like the Kyle Hamilton side is where Kerry G is going to play. And I would imagine Justin Walters would be more of a boundary guy of the incoming Justin Walters already here, but then Kerry G showed up this summer. So that is the secondary depth chart the last time I had a conversation about it.
All right, Brent, just highlighting what you said earlier. Dude, the Freeman interview has me so fired up. He needs to be the next head coach. Without a doubt, I truly will be disappointed if they don't make that happen. That man could build a dynasty. So that's right what Brian was talking about with the excitement over Marcus Freeman. But again, I'm kind of with you on let's let him coach a couple games.
I'm not saying I disagree with anything. It almost comes across as I'm bashing Marcus Freeman. Trust me, I'm not. I mean, I was the first person who wrote about he needs to be the next D coordinator.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm all about
we're both right there. Yeah.
It's just, can we just let him coach a game before we start trying to get rid of Brian Kelly? Because let's not forget, it was Brian Kelly is the reason he's here to begin with.
Yes.
Okay. So let's give Coach Kelly a little bit of credit for that. And again, this is coming from me, right? Someone who's not been bashful about, ripping Brian Kelly. But the reality is Marcus Freeman needs to co-coach a game. And here's the other thing. If he goes out and gives up 35 points in September to a team, I don't want to hear people saying, oh, he'll never be the head coach of Notre Dame.
Right.
Let's just let him coach a game. He's not going to be the head coach in 2021. Okay.
Right.
He's the D coordinator. So let's let him do that job and do it at a great level, which I think he will. And then we can start having some head coaching conversations down the road. Because, hey, Brian Kelly ain't leaving in the next month and a half, nor should he.
No.
Okay. Marcus Freeman's the D coordinator. Let's enjoy that run as his defensive coordinator, and then we'll see what happens next. Because if Notre Dame goes 8-4 this year, nobody's going to be. You're not going to hire anybody from the staff to be the net replacement,
right? Because they're all going to be gone. Yeah. Love this question, by the way, Brian. Timothy Church says, love the draft projection shows. Would it surprise you and or Vince if George Takis played himself into a late round pick? I personally feel like he can do it. Wouldn't surprise me. Let me tell you, I am a huge George Takis fan. I think he's going to lock down the number 2 tight end position. And we've seen, and not just from a George Takis situation, but we've seen the number 2 tight end for Notre Dame get drafted. Like that's
in
not
the 3rd round.
Right. That's
this
a day
past
2.
year.
That's a day 2 situation. So
it's one of the first tight ends off the board. We're talking about Tommy Trumbull, by the way.
Yes. And could I see George Tech as being a day 3 kid in the fourth, in the 4, 5, 6, 7, in that neighborhood? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. No question. Hey Bob 157 says, also speaking of the Freeman interview, he talks about a conversation he had with Kelly about Kelly wanting to take the next step and, quote, close the gap, unquote. Excited for the future.
We now have evidence that Brian Kelly listens to our show. I'm just kidding.
I think you need to send him a shirt. I want him to see him wear that shirt. But
I'm definitely going to send it to him. Definitely going to send it to him.
We got another super chat, Brian. This is out of control.
DJ Wilson, and
awesome.
I love hearing this. I love hearing this. Enjoyed the FSU preview. Thank you so much, DJ, by the way. So DJ's a regular. Enjoyed the FSU preview. I like the recruiting, but I'm ready for this year. Me too.
Exactly. Too. No question.
100%. 100%.
That's awesome. Yep. Again, with the Freeman interview, he says Kelly told him that he was flat out sick of losing to those guys. I think that's why he tried so hard to get Marcus here.
That's what I said this on a radio show last night, and I'll say it again now. Like, I think Brian Kelly losing to those teams, and again, this wasn't a situation like 2012 where they were outclassed. This wasn't like 2015 where it was so obvious that Notre Dame had about 5 guys that could compete with Ohio State. Will Fuller, Jalen Smith before his injury, Quentin Nelson.
Your silence speaks
Ronnie
volumes.
Stanley. There was a couple. I'm just trying to remember who. But overall, that team just couldn't compete with Ohio State. I mean, they had Ezekiel. I think four of their starting DBs were first or second round picks. They had Joey Bosa, who, before he got booted. Ezekiel Elliott, Michael Thomas was on that team. I mean, that team was just loaded. This past year, I think he realizes we got outplayed and we got outcoached, but we are not that far behind. I really think he watched that game and said, we're not that far behind them. We're not as good as them yet. We're not there yet, but we're close. And I think that closeness can be like, you know what? What can be the difference? It's hiring a Marcus Freeman, right? It's being more invested in recruiting for a couple of years. It's going out and doing this and doing that. And instead of saying, hey, Brian Kelly, hey, look, we've been to the playoff 3 of the last 4 years or 2 of the last 3 years. Give me a pay raise. It's like, hey, give us more money as a program so we can go out and do this.
Huge, yeah.
And I think Jack Swarbrick's on board because, look, both of their tenures are coming to a close, Swarbrick and Kelly's.
Fair.
And look, when I say that they care about their legacy, understand that's not an insult. I care about my legacy. I mean, if I was the head coach of Notre Dame, I would care even more about my legacy. When Lou passed away, it really hit me. And I've done a lot of soul searching of, it wasn't that people commented Lou so much for how he's a great historian and all that, which they did. It was the man he was. That's the legacy he left. And so, if when I'm gone, like, how do I want people to remember me by? And so in a non-death manner, when Brian Kelly leaves Notre Dame, when Jack Swarbrick leaves Notre Dame, what's the legacy they're leaving behind? And I think that matters to them, and it should matter to them. And I think Brian Kelly realizes we're really freaking close. And if I got to do this, and this to make it happen, then let's go make it happen. But I want a freaking championship.
Well, clearly something he saw, something has flipped the switch in Brian Kelly.
There's no way he does what he did to get Marcus Freeman 3 years ago.
That's what I'm saying. And that was the first tip to me that he sees something, right? Was how he went after Marcus Freeman. Because everybody remembers Marcus Freeman was headed to LSU. I mean, he was on LSU.
That was the reports, yeah.
That's what we were hearing. Like, it was done.
I had an article written saying he wasn't coming to Notre Dame. I was told by sources they met with him. He liked it, but it's looking like it's going to go to LSU. And everybody at LSU thought they were going to get him.
Yes. And Brian Kelly, whatever he did, and I assume that he mentioned something along those lines in that interview, whatever he did brought Marcus Freeman to Notre Dame. Brian Kelly could have been like, we tried. Hey, good effort, guys. But he changed it. And then now what he's doing on the recruiting trail, you talked about how this is pet project for Billy Shroud.
Here's another super chat that addresses this too, Vince, from Justin Nagel. Says Freeman's on the Chris Zort's pod, said he'd rather find the best players who can make it at Notre Dame rather than go straight to the Notre Dame guys. That's what Lou Holtz did. That's what Lou and that's the difference. That's it. Find me a kid that like Tony Rice was not the modern traditional Notre Dame guy. Right. Chris Zorich was not the modern Notre Dame guy, meaning great student. He's already a ready-made he was a great kid who could make it at Notre Dame and who needed the resources at Notre Dame to be successful. And now you look at Tony Rice, he's absolutely a Notre Dame man. You look at Chris Zorich, he's absolutely a Notre Dame man. But 3-4 years ago, they wouldn't have gone after Chris Zorich. Not that they couldn't get him into school. They wouldn't have gone after him. Marcus Freeman will, because he sees this is a kid that with our resources, this kid could thrive here. It's not your traditional Notre Dame kid, but he can thrive here. And that's what you have to do. Absolutely what you have to do. So if he did say that, and I'm assuming he did, I'm excited about it. I'm very excited about it.
Coleman Smith asking about Lucas. Any word on Lucas? Is it one of those recruitments that the longer it plays out, the better?
No, that's just one that was always going to be a long game. His recruitment was always going to be the long game. So it's not about, it's just, I mean, it's not, he's not even in decision making. He's going to be on campuses in the fall. I mean, that's one that was always going to, not every kid's going to decide in the summer. A lot of the best players are going to wait. And he is one guy that I've always been told would wait.
Michael Collins seems quiet regarding Brian Polian and his role/title change. Is he more admin behind the scenes now with Brian Kelly? Do you see him moving on for a head coaching job sooner than later, or staying until Brian Kelly retires?
You and handle that one, Vince. I have no comment.
The only comment that I have is that he does want to be a head coach, and the change in title was cognizant of that.
We think
pushing him in that direction.
We believe that.
We believe. That is my opinion. I think if the right opportunity arises, he would be out the door tomorrow.
That's not saying he doesn't love Notre Dame. It's just that he has higher aspirations than just being an assistant coach and special teams coordinator.
Absolutely. But like I said,
I have no comment.
If the right opportunity came around, I think he would take it. He's flat out said he wants to be head coach again. So I mean, it's not a big secret. And when titles get changed around, is it a money thing? Yes, no question. But is it also something to pad the resume to get them to the next step? Absolutely. And I think that's what this situation appears to be for me.
Ryan Michael, another super chat. Y'all, thank y'all so much. This has been this is phenomenal. Thanks for giving us continuous great Notre Dame news and info during the offseason. You guys help a ton when there are no games to watch. BD, glad all is okay. Go Irish. Thank you so much. And I don't normally say this because we're trying to be professional, but absolutely, man, go Irish. I love it. You guys got me fired up today.
Well, the fact that we have all of these guys and gals in here in July is just we've talked about it a bunch, Brian. Yeah. It's awesome. Like, I can't wait for the season. I can't wait.
Like Ron, I got Ron Tacharla. I got your rendering. It looks awesome. I'm now trying to find a frame for it. And so, because it's going to be on the backdrop here very, very soon. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm very excited about it. So it's been truly humbling. It really has. And it's been fun. It's honestly, that's what makes July fun right now, is because it's this community. We're talking ball every day, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Okay, just your ordinary Joe jumping in, and I think this is actually really interesting. It seems universally believed that playing at home is an advantage. So 2 questions. 1, can that be quantified? Seems Vegas usually ascribes about 3 points to it. And number 2, what would you say are the top 3 factors?
Well, I think there's several things. One is routine. Mm-hmm. Being at home, it's much easier to stay in your routine. You know, you get in, like Notre Dame, for example, they have a hotel they stay in as a team. You don't have to go to an airport. You don't have to get on a plane. You don't have to worry about the jet lag of playing. You're staying in a strange place.
Go wrong,
right?
Travel. Yeah.
I think a lot of those things, I think that's a factor in it. I think that also, the home crowd, I think, look, you feed off energy, right? I mean, you see all athletes of all places, you feed off energy, and the hostile crowd can be something that can give your home team some energy. It's something that can make the opposing team difficult. And I also think the volume of the crowd, we saw this with Notre Dame at Georgia in 2019, where if the crowd's loud enough, then all of a sudden you have trouble communicating, and now that's in your head, as opposed to not only do I got to worry about the Georgia defense if you're Ian Book, but I got to make sure that my guys heard the flip and call or the checks or all that stuff. I think that can factor into it. But honestly, Joe, I think the biggest thing is your team good or not? I think the home field thing can get a little bit overblown. Bad teams lose at home. Good teams don't. I mean, did Brian Kelly all of a sudden find some magic potion that he gave his players in 2017 that meant that they don't lose any more home games? or is it just they've had better teams? I mean, is there something that the 2019 and 2020 teams did and the 28 teams did that they could have gone back and changed for the Tulsa game in 2010? No, they have a better team, right? I mean, that's really what it boils down to. They have a better team. And if you have, Alabama lost a lot at home. I mean, a lot of Alabama's losses under Nick Saban have been at home. They lost to Texas A&M at home. They lost to Ole Miss at home. So, if you have a good team, you're going to lose less at home. If you don't have a good team, it doesn't matter. If you're hosting Alabama and you're Vanderbilt, it doesn't matter where you play that game. You're going to get smacked, And
I'll tell you, routine is the big one. I mean, routine is the big one. A lot of guys are in a set routine, and when they have that routine, they're good to go. Me personally, I love playing on the road. It seems like there's less pressure from a playing standpoint, from a coaching standpoint. There's just less to do when you're on the road. I like it. You just show up, you play the game, and you leave like that.
It's a little different when there's flights involved. Just having done that before, it's a little. You have to leave the day before and then stay in a hotel.
Right.
That's a little different animal. But yes, when I was at the D3 level, we had flights one year when we went to the playoffs, but you're
with a bus
it's
ride.
an hour and a half drive, something like that. But even those, you go on a 4 or 5 hour bus ride, the day before a game, that can wear you out.
Those are the worst.
But here's another example, right? So Alabama has beaten LSU 9 of the last 10 years. The only win for LSU was in 2019. That was at Alabama. Right? Why did they win that year at Alabama? They had a better team. Simple as that. The previous years when they lost to Alabama had the better team. And that's really a big reason for
it. Nate Wallace said some guy compared Kyle Hamilton to Taylor Mays a couple days back. What an insult. Taylor Mays is more like Sean Taylor.
Now let's pump the brakes a little bit on going to one extreme to another. And Backus is my guy. I mean, Backus tends to be a little negative, but you know what? He steps up. He owned it. He made his case.
He backed up his case too. With what I mean,
he thinks he backed up his case. I don't think he did, but I got no respect from. I got nothing but respect for him. We just disagree on this.
And that's okay.
But I also am not going to compare him to Sean Taylor. They're different players. And but yes, I agree with you, Nate. He's more in the Sean Taylor from an impact standpoint than he is Taylor Mays. There's no question about it. I don't see that at all. But can I tell you a funny Sean Taylor story?
Please.
Tell me how much the game has changed in recent years. You say, why are teams scoring so many more points now? There was a highlight video came out about a year or two ago. Somebody put it on YouTube on one of the years that Sean Taylor had passed away. They put this highlight video from when he was at Miami. And I'm watching the highlight and I'm going, targeting,
exactly.
Targeting. He'd be ejected every game.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one of the things that the game has changed. You don't see that kind of thing anymore, which kind of, to me, I don't like that. I would have loved that when I was playing quarterback and receiver. I don't like it now, but you can't, the game isn't as violent, and to a degree, I think that makes sense. But to another degree, I think some of these things are just it's lame in some other areas. I mean, some of it's look, that kind of hit should not be allowed in football.
Sure,
but some of them are that's a violent hit, but it's football. You're padded. I've always told people getting hit like that doesn't hurt nearly as bad as you think it does.
Mm-hmm.
The only, it does. I mean, that's what pads are for. The only time I've ever really gotten hurt with a hit is when my head got driven into the ground. That's more from someone grabbing me and landing on me and driving my head into the ground.
Right.
That hurts a lot more than getting drilled. I mean, it does. I've been hitting I only got blindside hit one time, and I got hit, and a guy racked me. It was the only time I ever fumbled a ball in my life because I just didn't see him coming, and I didn't hurt. It just because I wasn't bracing for it either. I just I was all loose and
that's
whatever.
The other thing. If you're loose like that, that helps.
The only time I've ever got hurt, I mean, there's been times you get your ankle rolled up on, and I got my shoulder driven on the ground. But the only time I ever got woozy or felt pain from a hit is when I got a guy hit me from behind. I was running, I was rolling. I threw the ball across my body, made the catch, and the guy hit me, and I had nothing to brace myself, and he just drove my head right into the ground. And that's the only time I ever kind of whoa, what the heck's going on? And the only other time the one time I got a concussion, it didn't hurt. The guy, I threw a pass, a Hail Mary at halftime. The kid came up and hit me right on my chin. And I got a concussion. Now I played the whole second half. I don't remember it. I literally have no recollection of that game. I went like 15 for 20 in the second half. So my head coach said, my head coach said, before our next game, I'm going to hit you upside the head with a baseball bat. But like, I guess on the bus, I was saying some really strange things and I don't remember any of it, but it didn't hurt. It just was that weird spot. I mean, so, but anyway, I mean, the game has changed a lot and you're never going to see another Sean Taylor unless he plays a quarter of every game.
Because he's going to get ejected.
He's going to get kicked out. Like we're going to get this guy for a quarter. He's going to lay someone out, and then he's going to not play until the next game because he gets knocked. You know, you tell him, "Hey, look, it's almost halftime. You better knock somebody out because if you wait to the next half, you can't play next week." So but Sean Taylor was a tremendous, and he wasn't just a hitter. I mean, he did so many great things, but like the hitting is what you really, really remember about him.
Domer Grizz with an interesting one here. Michael Floyd moved around the formation so much that Mayock kept repeating the phrase, "Where's Waldo?" ND clearly hasn't been doing that as much recently. Why not? Is that on the head coach, the offensive coordinator, or the wide receiver coach?
First two. It's not on the receivers coach. That's not something you're going to hear me blaming Del Alexander for. No. That's on the head coach first and the OC second.
Correct.
And that's absolutely something that needs to change.
Yes.
And I've broken this down before, Domer Grizz. It's a great observation. Yes. You can't. Here's the thing. If I know where your best player is always going to be, it's going to be a lot easier. It doesn't mean I can stop him per se.
Sure.
Right? Doesn't mean Toledo is going to be able to stop Michael Mayer, but at least they're going to know where he's going to line up. Then it gives them chances to they can have a better chance to game plan for it. And then when you do play teams like Alabama and Clemson and Ohio State that actually do have talent that's comparable to you, then they can stop a top player if they always know where he's going to be.
Right.
I think Notre Dame's done a decent job. They've done a decent job with that and with the tight ends.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. Yeah, because
I don't think they've done a very good job with that with the receivers. Like I definitely would have done like a lot of that with like Will Fuller. I would have done a lot. And Chase Claypool like played three different. He started in the slot in 2017. He started at X in 2018. Started at W in 2019. But they never did it like within a season. And the one game that I remember them moving him around a lot was the Navy game. It was sort of one of his breakout games in 2019 when he really started dominating. And remember, he caught that seam route against Navy right up the seam for a touchdown because Navy was not prepared for him to be there. And so you remember that? It was in November. It was late in the season. I'm trying to remember. He had 7 catches for 117 yards and 4 touchdowns. And it was, I mean, they just left him uncovered. Chase Claypool in 2019, they left him uncovered down the seam because they weren't prepared for him to be there. And that's the kind of thing that you look at and say, it's like, I said this, I had an All-American running back in 2002, Matt Bernardo. And we had a play, I think it was against Ursinus. Was it against Johns Hopkins or Ursinus? Actually, we did it both games, but I can't remember which one was like a 75-yard touchdown. This was a late in the game. This was a late in the season game, and he was an All-American running back. Our best player had over 20 touchdowns that year, and we lined him up at tight end and just ran him on a seam route. And they had no clue where they didn't have any. They did not react to it at all. They saw our tight end Robbie Sherman over here. We had Mike Markerbrad at running back because we'd go to a 2 tight running back set, and they did not recognize that our All-American was lined up at tight end. Now you can't do that in college because our running back is similar in size to a Division III defensive end and linebacker, right? So
correct.
It's not something that I say Notre Dame should put Kyron Williams at tight end. I'm not saying that.
So obvious.
Right?
Yes.
At the Division III level, it's not as obvious. My 5'11", 200-pound running back doesn't look a whole lot different than their defensive end. Does that make sense? Right. That's the big difference. One of the big differences at D3 level. The point being is that they didn't see him and ran him right down the seam, and he went uncovered. He threw a touchdown to him for like 7-some yards. You can do something like that with your receivers, meaning if you never know where they're going to be, it just makes it so much harder to get a defensive call in and to get a game plan in. And that's one thing I'd like to see him do more of. It's a great question, Grizz, by the way.
Yeah, he's got another good one here. How do Williams and Merriweather compare to a healthy Kevin Austin in size, speed, and athleticism? Okay,
so Williams is very similar to Kevin Austin in size and ball skills. Merriweather is more close to Kevin in athleticism, although I would think that maybe Merriweather might have a little bit more long speed. But, CJ is a very well-built guy. Kevin was a rocked out. Remember the pictures from the opening, Vince, back then when he was just ripped. CJ is much closer to Kevin size-wise. I think Tobias is more close to him athletically. But if I had to only compare one of those two to Kevin, I would say CJ is much closer to Kevin, just not quite as fast, but very similar in a lot of other ways. Tobias is more of a Tobias is more, again, I don't know if there's a Notre Dame game guy that I would compare him to. I don't think Chase is quite the comparison because Chase was so big and strong. That's why I say the comparison for him is T. Higgins. I mean, that's the guy that I would – Kevin Austin, I think, is a good comp for C.J. Williams. T. Higgins is a much better comp for Tobias Merriweather.
Another super chat, Brian.
Brandon, man, he figured it out. We got it rolling. It was amazing to hear in the interview about how Kelly stepped up, recruited, and sealed the deal with Marcus. It definitely shows that Kelly isn't playing. And we said at the time, like, look, I'm a believer that I'm going to tell you all facts. I don't dislike Brian Kelly. I don't root against Brian Kelly, but my job is not to be Brian Kelly's friend or Brian Kelly's buddy. My job is to tell y'all the truth as I see it. And so when Brian Kelly was not doing what he needed to do, I'm just going to tell you all that, okay? But here's the other part of it. When Brian Kelly's doing right, we're going to definitely tell you that, right? And so we talked about this at the time. Deal doesn't happen. We have been in this for 6 months. That deal doesn't happen if Brian Kelly doesn't say, we got to make it happen. And that meant going back to Jack Swarbrick, going back to and say, hey, we need more. We've got to get this guy. Then there was no excuses. And if Brian Kelly has that mentality, which he hasn't had for years, if Brian Kelly has that mentality, you guys want to know why I'm optimistic about things and why my tone has changed a little bit more in recent weeks? I think it has. I've had people tell me they think it has. That's a big part of it, is because that's the Brian Kelly I've been wanting to see. Now, if we can see him become the Brian Kelly as an offensive mind guy and he lets Tommy Rees turn it loose, and that's also part of it, there's no more roadblocks in front of Notre Dame. The recruiting issues were self-inflicted.
Yes.
He's removing those roadblocks. The offensive thing is self-inflicted. If he removes that final stumbling block, this is why I'm so excited. This is also why I'm like, hey, let's pump the brakes on Marcus Freeman being the D coordinator or the head coach. How about we let Marcus Freeman be the D coordinator, go recruit some studs, let Brian Kelly finally be the full version of himself as a coach, and let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens, and let's enjoy that ride. Then we can worry about Marcus Freeman becoming the head coach.
Domer Grizz back at it. He says, how does our recent 4 years of double-digit wins compare to back when Michigan State won double digits and Big Ten championships? It seems like BK is creating a more sustainable team. Michigan State really declined.
Well, Michigan State had some things working against them at the time. You look at Michigan State. Here's what he's talking about. In 2010 and 11, they went 11-3. Then they had a down year in 2012, went 7-6, and the next 3 years they went 13-1, 11-2, 12-2. I think a couple things. Number one is I think their schedules were somewhat favorable. Penn State was down a lot during that stretch.
Yeah.
That was sort of the era of the Joe Paterno scandal and then the Bill O'Brien. Michigan was down during that period of that stretch. His success in 10, 11, 12, and 13, a lot of that was with Brady Hoke as the head coach at Michigan. Ohio State, his first couple years, Urban Meyer didn't show up till 2012, right? So that was a time when Ohio State was then making that transition from Jim Tressel. So I think there was a lot of things working in his favor, and he took advantage of it, especially Michigan, because they had a lot of success in the state of Michigan that they wouldn't have had back in the past, Vince, and with him. And so I think it was the right time, and he's a good football coach. But I think there was a lot of things that happened at Michigan State too that he was getting good players, he was getting top players and all that other kind of stuff, and let him build everything. What's wrong?
I got shoved to the bottom, and I'm really upset about it. Sorry, because there was some good stuff in there. Sorry, I didn't mean to make faces. I wear my heart on my sleeve here.
Sorry.
There was some really good comments right around the top of the hour at 1 o'clock that said it's going to take these guys 3 hours just to get through the questions to get 1 o'clock. Which
let me see if on the live show, like the actual live show, if that stuff is there.
Then we can just verbally shout them out there. That would be good.
Let me just see up here.
If that's the case, I can pull it up on my phone too.
It doesn't look like it. Yeah. It doesn't look like it. Sorry.
Okay.
Well, anyway, so that's what I think has kind of helped Michigan State is I think they got a little fortunate. I think the Big Ten was down. I think they had a very good blue-collar team, and they had some good NFL talent. I think he stopped his recruit. When his downfall happened is he tried to take that next step from a recruiting talent, and they took some kids that they probably shouldn't have taken.
Yeah.
Austin Robertson, some guys like that, and they lost the culture. The culture that had made Michigan State that blue-collar, grinded-out, physical team, they tried to then start bringing in some stars, and those guys were not about the team. They were about the stars. And I think they lost their culture. I think that's ultimately what did them in. But it's also Penn State got better. Michigan got better under Jim Harbaugh. Now they're back down, obviously. And then, of course, we've seen some other programs ascend. Wisconsin's, that was another thing. Wisconsin went through a rough time. Remember that Gary Anderson debacle when he came in from Utah State and it didn't work and he left and all that. So it was the perfect storm for Michigan State, and Michigan State took advantage of that. And, of course, their schedule wasn't super tough. And they were also, Notre Dame was rebuilding a little bit, but even Notre Dame back then still beat them more often than not. So that's why it's another good question, Chris.
Okay. Well, like I said, I got pushed down. So if you guys had anything, just go ahead and put it at the bottom, and I will try to get to it.
Yeah, we apologize for that. There's really not a lot we can do about it. What we need to start doing, Vince, is when I'm going on one of my long rants, is you just need to screenshot some questions, for the next maybe 10 minutes, and then just kept doing it, which can be a pain in the butt. But I just hate losing all those good questions.
I do too, and I apologize, guy. I'm actually in the middle of writing an email to StreamYard because she said to reach out whenever we had an issue. Yeah. That's an issue for me. All right, Matt D says Baylor sounds like a drill sergeant in the last couple of videos. I love it. Those kids respect him. Yep. Matty K55, I'm 100% pumped for this season as we get closer, but for some reason, I'm not worried about North Carolina, USC, and Wisconsin anymore, but I'm worried about Cincinnati. Why? Am I right to worry?
Well, you should be worried about all those teams from the standpoint of if Notre Dame doesn't bring it, they can beat Notre Dame. I mean, so those aren't going to be games where Notre Dame is going to come out and roll the balls out and beat those teams. I think all four of those teams are capable of beating Notre Dame. I think as far as being worried about Cincinnati, I guess when I say worry, I mean, worry from the standpoint of, are those teams capable of beating Notre Dame? Yes, they are. Do I expect any of them to beat Notre Dame? I mean, if Notre Dame plays their A game, they won't lose to anybody in the regular season. If they play their A- game, they probably don't lose to anybody. If they play their B game, then there's 5-6 teams that could beat them. Mm-hmm. I'd throw Virginia Tech in there. I think Virginia Tech's a team that could be dangerous. And then there's always that upset that can happen. I mean, who would have predicted Purdue to beat Ohio State in 2018 or Iowa to beat them in 2017 or, right. Syracuse, 4-8 Syracuse to beat Clemson in 2017 or Pitt to beat Clemson in 2016. So those games can happen. But, I mean, I think with Cincinnati, the thing that would concern me is Cincinnati's the one team on that schedule that, to me, has the kind of defense that could give Notre Dame some serious problems because they do have really good corners. I mean, Ahmed Gardner is one of the best corners in the country, and they have an elite defensive end in Myjai Sanders. And they have a lot of talent coming back from that team. And Marcus Freeman, the guy that we're all excited about, rightfully so, he laid that foundation on defense. And Luke Fickell's a heck of a defensive coach as well. He was a co-D coordinator at Ohio State for a long time. So I think that they concern me because they have some athletes on offense that can make some big plays if Notre Dame doesn't bring it. But they have a defense that can give Notre Dame problems. That's why, to me, Wisconsin and Cincinnati, I'm actually a little bit more concerned about because I think Notre Dame can outscore North Carolina and USC if their offense is what we think it is. But even if Tommy Rees makes the changes we want to make, I still think Wisconsin and Cincinnati, because of the matchup up front, can give Notre Dame problems. And why Cincinnati probably concerns me if I'm not looking at the timing of the games and just looking at the games individually. The reason Cincinnati would concern me a little bit more is because what Wisconsin doesn't have is the kind of perimeter talent on defense. Like the Wisconsin give Notre Dame problems in the trenches, and Notre Dame can screen and quick game and roll out and give Wisconsin problems because they can't run with Notre Dame's athletes. Cincinnati can. And that's the more concerning thing for me.
Okay, great question here by Robert. He says, could you explain a bit how Notre Dame will get pressure off the edge in a 3-3-5 defense? MTA as an end doesn't seem like a prototypical edge rusher, so is there more of an emphasis on pressure up the middle? I already wrote down the time, by the way.
Well, I wasn't writing down time. I was writing on a football 101 topic. Robert just gave us a great football 101 topic.
Yes, he did.
And I think, Robert, it's going to be easier for me to show it to you, and hopefully maybe we can do something like this next week. But I'll try to explain it as best I can without the resources that we
visual
hope to have
props
here very soon.
Yeah.
Number one is the one thing you have to understand: a 3-3-5 is they will line up with some heavy looks where they're like power looks, and so they'll run twists and stuff off that. So they'll slant the DN and bring the tackle outside, or they'll slant the DN in and bring a linebacker. So one thing you have to understand is almost every single snap on first and second down in a 3-3-5 defense, you will see a linebacker crashing somewhere, whether it's off the edge, whether it's up the middle. They will insert a fourth guy almost every time. And so that's how you get to your 4 guys kind of attacking the front. You'll see a linebacker crash. You can see, but the ends will also, but that also then allows the ends, and you'll see Myjai Sanders. So if you want to know how they do it, go watch. I'll tell you this, Robert. This is actually, I mean this. Go to YouTube, type in it's MYJAI Sanders highlights, and you'll see the kid from Cincinnati who I believe he had double-digit sacks last year, Vince, didn't he? I'm going to look that up real quick. He was a really good pass rusher last year. Kind of had a breakout season for Cincinnati last year. No, I'm sorry. He only had 7 sacks in 10 games, but he had 10.5 tackles for loss. He's considered a first-round draft pick, but he's a long, athletic kid, very similar to Isaiah Foskey. But he rushes off the edge a lot. And then also at times you'll see that end kind of power the tackle, and you'll see a linebacker coming off the edge on that. And again, it's a blitz from the standpoint of they're bringing a linebacker. But to me, a blitz in a traditional sense is where you're bringing more numbers than we have to block. If you're just bringing a linebacker, that's just more of a stunt to me. And it's not the same as a blitz.
Right.
But so it's not technically a blitz where you're exposing yourself to being hurt behind it. It's just we're bringing a 4th guy. We can still drop 7. And then you bring that linebacker off the edge. And that's why I think we'll see a lot this year where they'll be in a 3-3-5 with Isaiah Foskey as the guy that's not on the ball. We may see like Adamiola and Myron as the ends and Kurt at the nose. And then they'll move Isaiah Foskey around, line him up on the edge, bring him off the edge, bring him up the middle. I mean, kind of like, because remember the big sack that Dalen Hayes had against Clemson in overtime last year? He was lined up over the guard. He was in a stand-up position over the guard. They moved him around. I think we'll see some things like that to get matchups because, I don't know if your guard can block Isaiah Foskey on 3rd down. So you get that matchup. So there's different ways to get it. With the end, sometimes you can line them up wide. There's not going to line up in just one position. You can stun outside. You can bring a linebacker outside. You can crash a linebacker right off the inside hip of the tackle. So then if you slant your tackle, your end outside, and then you bring that linebacker and just crash his inside hip and say, which one is he going to take? And can your guard get out fast enough to help him outside? Those are other ways to do it. So it's going to be versatile, but I think that's be a great football 101 topic for us to do here in July.
Michael Collins, what is the safety board now if Pope is unlikely? If they strike out, will they, 1, move a cornerback on the roster? Number 2, ask Amorion Walker to play DB. 3, move Watts from wide receiver to safety. P.S. Mr. Adamiola is literally the daddy.
He's the man. There's no question.
I don't think they're going to do any of those right away.
No, you have to check out the intel that I put out. And I'd say, because there's just some things that I don't want to say publicly because that just, I don't put a lot of this thing, but I'll say this. I think they're comfortable with where they're at secondary wise. And this is something I will say, not specific to the Pope thing, but here's what I'll say is you have to understand is they signed 4 cornerbacks last year. They signed a 6'3" corner, a 6-foot corner, another 6-foot corner, and then JoJo, who's not big. This year they have 3 cornerbacks committed. One 6'3", one is 5'11" with long arms. The other one's 5'11". So there's some length. There's some length there. And then they're trying to get Benjamin Morrison, who I'm told is up to 6'1" now. So if they get him, which again they're still trying, then you look at it and say, okay, they're going to have some really long guys. I have a feeling, and this is just a projection. This is a guess. But knowing Marcus Freeman and seeing how he's kind of an outside-the-box thinker, the 3-3-5 they went to is kind of a new deal. It's not like most 3-3-5 defenses. I think the 3-3-5 defense sucks. When I first heard that Marcus Freeman was going to a 3-3-5, I was like, oh, I lost some respect for him because I've had my eye on him for a while. But then I watched how he was doing the 3-3-5 because when I think 3-3-5, I think Big 12. That's what they do in the Big 12. And it's just like try to make a couple stops and hold them under 40, and then you can win. But his 3-3-5 is completely different. It's nuanced. It's a bit versatile. It's a bit technical. They can play big boy football out of that 3-3-5. It's an aggressive 3-3-5. It's not a bend but don't break 3-3-5 like we see most teams that do the 3-3-5. It's trying to match up personnel-wise, and I think he's ahead of the game. And what I think he's doing, if I had to guess, and I truly have not been told this by anybody, so if it doesn't happen, just understand it's a guess. If it does happen, just say, like, this is because I'm reading what I think he's capable of. I think Marcus Freeman looks at this and says, where in the rules does it say we have to go 4 down linemen, 3 linebackers, 2 corners, and 2 safeties to play football? Where's the rule that says that? Because the offenses aren't respecting the old rules of you have to have a tight end and a fullback in the game, right? So why do we have, okay, so you go to the 3-3-5. Well, Why do we have to have 3 safeties on the field or 2 safeties on the field, right? Why can't we just play 1 or none? And say, if you're going to put 4 receivers on the field, USC, why do I have to have 2 safeties? Why can't I put Ryan Barnes, Chance Tucker, Benjamin Morrison if they get him, Devin Moore, Jaden? I mean, why can't I put some kind of combination of that group where 2 of those guys are 6'3", another one of those guys is 6'1", a couple others are 6 foot, and say they can tackle, they can hit, they can play the alleys. They may not be traditional safeties, but USC runs the ball 90 times, for 90 yards a game. North Carolina is not playing a power football. Why can't I have 4 state corners on the field? So I think that's the thing to look at. And when because you look, say, well, if you didn't think you were going to get Jake Pope, why'd you stop recruiting Kevin Winston? Well, what's my knock on Kevin Winston? He's not a cover guy. He's a hitter. Well, Xavier Nwakpa can cover, right? And Jake Pope can cover. That's what they liked about him. But I think they're comfortable with their board that I don't think that they're going to do any – I think they're going to – the Pope thing, I'll explain more after he commits, if it was to Notre Dame or somewhere else. But I explain it more on the message board. I have an intel piece there with that. But I just feel like they're comfortable with their board. That's what I'll say. That's what I'm comfortable saying right now. But I have a feeling we're going to see Marcus Freeman revolutionize defense a little bit. That's just a prediction that I have. But why else try to recruit? Because they're trying to get a 4th corner in this class, right? That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get Benjamin Morrison. Mm-hmm. And I have not – I had a conversation the other day with somebody's like, well, you're going to move this guy? No, I'm going to leave him a corner. What about this? I mean, you can't leave all these guys a corner. Well, why? And that's just a very interesting conversation. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what this defense does, because he's just been kind of one step ahead in a lot of the stuff he's doing. He played great defense in the league that is basically the group of 6 version of the Big 12. And that's impressive. That you want to know why he was number 1 on my list of coaches to go get? That's why.
Brian, that's going to do it for the first half of our mailbag special here on Friday. And if you want to hear the second half, go check out the other podcast. But we will be right back with round 2 of the Friday free-for-all mailbag.
So let us explain why we're doing that. So we are changing a little bit on our podcast format. And so we're having to split these shows in 2 because they're like 3-hour podcasts, and it's just podcast people are just get a little overwhelming. So we talked with Blue Wire Pods. We made sure that they were cool with this. But so we're going to kind of cut our podcasts up. So when we do like normal shows on Monday to Friday, so like yesterday Wednesday we did the Florida State shows. We're going to cut up the first part, and it's just the Florida State piece, right? Then we pause, and then we kind of do another intro, and we dive into the second half. For y'all, it's going to seem a little weird, but just bear with us. It's what we need to do to make sure that we got the podcast rolling okay. And so we have the YouTube, but then we take these and we turn them into a podcast for our podcast people. And so that's what we're doing. So just bear with us a little bit on that. And it's a little weird, but it's kind of a quick thing for us to be able to do. And then the pause allows us to kind of find it and then cut it up and edit it and all that kind of stuff. So I appreciate your patience with that. But we wanted to explain to you guys why we were doing it that way. And I forgot that I told you to do that, Vince. I was like, man, that'll do it. Wait a minute, dude. We got a million more questions, man. What are you talking about?
Part 1.
No, it's okay. Part 1. We're good.
So welcome, Irish Breakdown family, back to part 2 of the Friday free-for-all mailbag. We are going to just continue right along here and jump right in. So John Fox says, love the show, guys. What do you know about the offensive line being sponsored by Mission Barbecue? I personally don't know anything, but I can tell you that if they're just giving them free food, I'm sure they would love every second of that.
And I'm sure they're going to get a little bit of financial compensation.
Yeah, I'm sure they will too. Mission Barbecue's great place, by the way. I love that.
I've heard some people that don't like it. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I love their mission too, not just the food itself, but the mission.
They stand up and do the Pledge of Allegiance every day at noon.
Yeah,
did you know that?
It's the national anthem. It's the whole
national
thing.
Anthem. That's right.
Right. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Yep. We got a super chat leading us off in part 2 here.
Brandon, he has figured out how to get the chats going. Brandon, he's trying to get me fired up, Vince. He's bringing up a Rivals question. You go ahead and read that one. Go ahead and read that one.
All right. It says Rivals Farrell top 5 head coach recruiters: Saban, Day, Sweeney, Smart, Cristobal. I truly feel BK could be in a top 5 list if he recruited to his full capacity. Could you imagine the potential of the Notre Dame program?
Okay, I'm so glad that you didn't ask me to speak on that list or
The
the person
list
who made the
specifically,
list.
yes.
But to your point, Brandon, I agree with you 100%. I think if Brian Kelly, look, here's the thing you understand is I don't want Brian Kelly to necessarily recruit like Ryan Day or Dabo or whatever. He's got to fit his personality. I feel like Brian Kelly, his personality, but also being the head coach of Notre Dame, you have a different aura about you. Kids view Notre Dame as different.
Sure.
Some don't like it. Some do. I mean, some like, hey, I don't want to go there. It's, and that was true when Lou Holtz was there. But like Brian Kelly he's kind of that guy. I'm trying to think how to explain this. Even for me, someone who's been around, like, I mean, Vince, you and I have been around a lot of well-known people and athletes and stuff like that. But when Brian Kelly walks in the room, you can see some people, even in the media, that kind of like sit up. You know what I mean? Like, he just commands a level of respect because he's the head coach of Notre Dame, but also partly because of his personality.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Kelly is when he wants to be, can be a very persuasive, convincing person, right? And so what I feel like is if you're using him the right way, and if he's doing things the right way, he doesn't have to talk to every recruit the way that Ryan Day does. But you make sure that the guys that you really want, that Brian Kelly's being used a way to let this kid know, like, you're different, you're special, or whatever. I mean, be involved. I mean, I like when he's involved, but he doesn't have to call everyone. He's not needed to call everyone. That to me is not using your resources properly. You don't need Brian Kelly to make 20 calls to Ashton Craig, right? Okay, you're going to get Ashton Craig. You know what I mean? But you need him to maybe get a Zach Rice or a Billy Schrouth. And so using him that way. So yes, I do believe if Brian Kelly is more involved in recruiting just the way that I would have used him if I was his recruiting coordinator, absolutely think he can be one of the 5. And this is why I've said for years, there's no reason Notre Dame can't have top 5 classes. And again, I don't mean top 5 rivals classes that are a points-based system that are faulty and flawed. I've broken that down. But a legitimate, who's landing the 5 best group of players in the country, I absolutely think it could be that. No question. Because it's about effectiveness. He may not have because Brian Kelly will never be, and I don't want him to be, like Dabo. Dabo's that way because that's who Dabo is. He's being himself.
Yeah.
I don't want him to act like some young, hip guy. That's not who he is.
No.
You're Brian Kelly. You're a guy that's been coaching 30 years. You're a guy with 2 national champions. Use that. Use who you are. And I think right now this offseason he is, and it is working like a charm. It is working like a charm.
Thomas Walsh is asking, where can I find those Bayless videos? The Notre Dame, the Irish breakdown message board, because I saw it over there.
Yeah, we'll start putting those, but but also on Twitter, if you follow Notre Dame's Twitter account and the Instagram account. But yes, Thomas, if you do sign up for our message board, I do plan on putting a lot of that stuff on there.
I thought I saw it.
I appreciate that. There is.
Okay.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you doing that, Vince.
No problem.
I appreciate that plug.
Hey man, gotta help it out. Let's see here. Here we go. Quinn Kelly. Hey guys, got a few questions. Where do we stand with Zach Rice and Snead? Are Merriweather and Williams locks? Watched that Freeman podcast last night, and he is a really sharp and smart dude.
Okay, Zach Rice, I still think is a ways away. I think Notre Dame has made up a lot of ground in the last 3 weeks. A lot of ground, to the point where I actually think they have a shot to get him now. I'm not predicting it. I don't even know necessarily I'm going to say they're his leader. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying now is as this process carries out, if they can stay where they are and close, they have a shot there. And I didn't think they had a shot for a long time. Jalen Snead, he's still figuring out what he want, the specifics of when he's going to do things. But I can't really say a whole lot more other than just I feel good. Just let's wait a few days, okay? But I feel good. Merriweather and Williams are not locks. I think Notre Dame is their leader for both. I think if they were both to pick today, I think they would pick Notre Dame. But I also would have said that at one point in time about Nicholas Singleton. I would have said that at one point in time about Billy Schrouth. I would have said that at one point in time about Carson Hinsman. I would have said that at one point in time about a lot of players that are not going to end up in this class, or right now don't look like they're going to end up in this class. So they've got to finish. They got to close. I would have said that at one point in time about Gavin Salchuk. I would have said that at one point in time about Dallin Hayden. So closing is going to be the key, but I like where Notre Dame is today. They just have to make sure that they continue to push. and continue to develop that relationship and close. They're closing on defense at an insane level. The guys are on the board for them to close that way on offense. They just got to do exactly what I just said. They got to close it, right? I mean, what's the whole part of it? I mean, it's gap closers. To get those gap closers, you gotta close on them. I mean, that's just the way it's got to be.
Brooks Beer, I'm pumped. Finally joined the chat as many Notre Dame podcasts as I've listened to the last few years. You guys are killing it. Kerry G, a guy to watch out for. Keep it up, guys. Welcome to the chat, Brooks.
Kerry's a guy that I think has a very high ceiling. Very high ceiling. That was a big, and it didn't get a ton of play, because it was kind of late and he's not like a super highly ranked guy. But the people that have watched this film, and I'm talking about people like you fans that have actually watched this film, people that like to watch film, they watch Kerry G and they're like, wait a minute, why are we talking more about this kid? I ranked him as a top 250 player last year right away. I gave him a 4.5 star upside grade, which means he's a guy and he was close to being that kind of 5-star guy. He's not quite explosive enough to be in a 5-star, but he has the upside of a top 50 national recruit. Kerry G's a really good football player and a guy that could do some different things. So yes, Brooks, that's a great first comment, man. And we will definitely keep it up. But Kerry G is a guy that I'm very curious to see how he develops and how he performs in Notre Dame, because he's got a lot of potential. I mean, LSU had him committed, right? I mean, LSU just doesn't take – if LSU doesn't have the complete defensive overhaul of their staff last year, he's probably at LSU. But he's a guy that Notre Dame should have gone after earlier because he's a very high academic kid. He's a Notre Dame fit in a lot of ways. But LSU just doesn't take anybody in the secondary, okay? Right. And so that's a good sign for me.
Matt D. Freeman said that Kelly called him and said money won't be an issue. That was awesome to hear, especially after Notre Dame has had the rep of being cheap when it comes to coaches' salaries. When they have.
And I'll tell you, that's not just something Brian Kelly did this offseason. That's something that Brian Kelly's been doing for a long time. A lot of people got mad at him with the flirtation with the NFL in 2012. I think it's one of those things where sometimes Brian Kelly doesn't think enough about the optics. That's a problem Brian Kelly's had, is he doesn't have someone advising him on the optics of some of the things that he says and does. But what I've been told behind the scenes by people that I trust that aren't necessarily Kelly supporters is that 2012 flirtation with the NFL was more about using that leverage to get more money for his coaches. He didn't necessarily want to. I mean, if the right offer comes along, I mean, you're going to look at it. But it wasn't necessarily about the NFL. It was about, let me use the leverage of the NFL to get more. He got a pay raise, obviously, but he also was about, because the way it works is the head coach in Notre Dame is given a pool. Here's your salary pool. Do with it what you'd like. And then you can choose, okay, I'm going to pay a defensive coordinator $2 million, but that means I'm going to have a bunch of assistant coaches that are making like $150, right? And so what he has done is just give me a bigger pool, and then he can use that. And, a guy like Chris O'Leary is not going to be making as much as a guy like Mike Elson. That's like any job, experience, talent, and all that stuff factors into it. But he's gotten a bigger pool. He's fought hard to get a bigger pool, where Notre Dame hasn't necessarily they're not fighting for scraps like they used to, but they're still not be able to compete with the big boys when it comes to assistant coach money. What he did with Marcus Freeman was taking that to another level. And for a Notre Dame coach to say money won't be an issue, it's my response to that is finally. Because Notre Dame can Notre Dame could outspend any team in the country. Right?
If they wanted to, yeah.
They could outspend any team in the country if they wanted to. Now, I don't think they need to spend money on some things. I'm saying they don't need to build a freaking slide, okay? I don't care about that. But raising money and having money is not an issue for Notre Dame.
Right.
If they want it to be. This tells me, and this is something I've been saying for a while, people say, well, the administration is not helping the football program. Bull crap. You got to ask for it. And Brian Kelly's stepping up. And I think the other thing is, if you're winning on the field and that's showing itself in revenue, that's going to matter. But let's not forget something else about how savvy of a move this is. This is during a COVID pandemic time when he made this move in January. The state of Indiana was still closed down. Notre Dame was coming off a year in which they couldn't have any. I mean, this is a tight revenue year. So for Notre Dame to still step up to the plate and say, if that's what you got to do to win a title, go get it done, tells me that not just Brian Kelly's serious. It's not just Jack Swarbrick is serious. The administrators, the board, the people that pull the purse strings, they understand that this program's close. And when you look at that, the new indoor facility, the renovations of the Goog that people are excited about. Notre Dame is spending, by the time the Goog is done, I guarantee you that they will spend over $1 billion in renovations in the last 7-8 years. I guarantee they'll be over $1 billion. And you don't do that if you're not serious about competing for titles. And that, to me, is the most encouraging thing about all this.
David Carpenter, referencing the podcast, he said something like, other places put cars in the end zones and have barbecues, and some kids you need to just get on campus with those things. But you need to close with what makes Notre Dame special. Love it.
100%.
That is so
true. He gets it.
Brandon has an interesting comment. It has always seemed like Ian Book had a high football IQ and was constantly studying film in the game. It's sometimes shocking to hear how much he missed his reads and failed to pull the trigger. Thoughts? Sometimes
I have no
things
doubt.
just don't translate.
I have no doubt that Ian Book studied film a lot. I don't know if I would say he necessarily had a high football IQ from the standpoint of, is he smart, like maybe on the board? Yes, but I don't think he processed things quickly on the field. I've just never had that sense. And I don't know if that can be fixed. But I think you combine that with the fact that they sort of created a culture of a fear of mistakes that hurt him as well. But, Steve Berline talked about this last year before the season. Ian Book, just his natural reaction when pressure comes is just to look down.
Mm-hmm.
And
so you can't,
that's not necessarily something
break that.
Some kids, you just can't teach that.
And I will also say, and this doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Ian Book, but some kids don't know how to watch film either. And just sitting in front of the computer and watching film isn't necessarily beneficial. You know what I mean? Again,
and that's not an issue at Notre Dame anymore, but
that, Carmine Burr, generally speaking, because I know you could go an hour on this, Brian. Who are the people that rank athletes at 247, Rivals, and others? What's their qualifications? Are they football people like ex-coaches, or are they more sports journalists?
It's a little bit of a combination. And some with Rivals, it's almost all journalists. 247 has a little bit more of a mix, but I think the thing I respect about 247 is the journalists also act like journalists. Like, for example, Greg Biggins and Brandon Huffman are two guys who I absolutely have a great deal of respect for in this business because, they know when to give their opinion and they know when to just report the news, and they work hard and they do a great job. Like Barton Simmons, for example, was, technically a journalist, but he was also a football guy. He played, I think, in the Ivy League, and Clark Lee just hired him on his staff there to do certain things. So, I think 247 puts a little bit more pride in the knowledge of the people they hire and are part of the process of recruiting. Now, I don't agree with a lot of their stuff, and there's some people that 247 has that I don't think have any clue how to evaluate players. But there's also a lot of people at 247 whose opinion I respect a little bit more than I do others. But ultimately, none of them are people that I would ever look at and say, hey, that guy's evaluation is gospel. But I just feel like if 247 makes a mistake, I feel like it's a mistake that's probably just, hey, it's a bad evaluation. We all have them, right? I don't put really anything nefarious on their missed rankings personally. I've never seen that per se. There's some things I think I've questioned over the years, but overall philosophy, I have no problem with it. I have much more of a problem with the process at the other place. And then, of course, the people doing it are for the most part, there's some good dudes there. I think Sam Spiegelman does a great job. He covers Texas and Louisiana. I think he does a great job. But for the most part, those rankings are borderline useless for me. And that is one thing I like about SI All-American, but you can leave that up, Vince. But John Garcia, for example, played college football, and I think he tries to look at it more from a coaching standpoint. And, our rankings, our quarterback rankings that John and I kind of talked through, there was a lot of good football discussion going back and forth on those. It wasn't about, well, hey, Rivals has them here too. We didn't look at them. We did not take into account at all where those people rank things. And so that's why our top five looks a little bit different than a lot of other people's top five.
Ryan Michael says, you mentioned earlier that the defensive tackle position didn't sub much in 2017 because of depth. Look how far we've come in 3.5 years. I'll let you rattle off the names because you're quicker at
that's Kurt Hinish, Jason Adamiola. I would imagine that's Jacob Lacey. RM would be HC be Howard Cross, RM Riley Mills, and then Gabriel Rubio. And he left off Aiden Keanaaina, who I would throw in there.
Good call.
And every single one of those guys would have been in the two deep in 2017, no question. And that's just, again, you talk about how far Mike Elson has brought this group in a very short period of time, and that's a perfect example, by the way. And I agree. If you see the picture of the helmet that Gabriel Rubio's going through, it's got he's got the one bar. He's got the one bar, like the big face map. He's got the bar going down the middle. You don't see that a whole lot anymore.
That is old school.
Yep. Yep.
Matt D says Freeman makes me wish I hadn't had a spinal fusion, a leg surgery, and 2 foot surgeries. Old man problems. That's pretty funny because we were talking about how I think you said it. We're too old to play anymore, but that's good stuff.
Yeah, somebody asked me, could Larry Bird the other day? Could Larry Bird be a great player in today's NBA? I said no. He's like 60 years old. That's how I feel. Vince is looking at questions. He's not hearing what I'm saying.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I was completely ignoring you. T. Stewart says, given that Notre Dame's wide receiver situation has changed, can Kendall Abdul-Rahman cancel his transfer?
No. Nor should he. I mean, look, I think Kendall needs to be at a place where they're going to be able to coach him up. He's very raw. He needs to be developed. And not if you wait till he's a junior and senior to develop him, he's not going to get developed. I think I like Kendall a lot. I think he needed to go somewhere they could build him up and give him more of a chance. And got another super chat down here, Vince. I'm gonna go ahead and grab real fast. Shelton Hager with just a donation. Shelton, I appreciate that very much. Appreciate that very, very much. Appreciate all y'all's contributions today. It's been awesome. It's been awesome.
Brandon says, Jack opened up the pocketbook, so now money wasn't a factor, and Notre Dame was the obvious choice. Love that. And again, as you mentioned, it's not just Jack Swarbrick. He's not necessarily in charge of the purse strings specifically. That even goes over his head.
Right.
So
now when Jack Swarbrick puts his emphasis on something, it usually gets done. But he has bosses too, right? And that's what I say. It's not just about Brian, and that's not meant to be an insult like Brian. Oh, it's not. But it's like, hey, look, you can't do this all by yourself. If the school's not, I mean, we saw this with Lou Holtz. Part of what hurt Lou Holtz was the school kind of turned on them. They didn't like that. They had new leadership, and it was people that didn't necessarily like the fact that football was so important. The leadership now, and look, it's leadership I have a lot of issues with when it comes to non-football related things. You know what I mean? But in regards to football, in the last 4 or 5 years, they have not been shy about doing what they need to do to make sure the football team can go out there and compete. Ronald T'Charla has a $5 donation to Super Chat. Robert, I appreciate that so much. Man, so much.
You're not kidding. Jordan says, do you think Everett Golson's myriad of mistakes created this Kelly ultra risk aversion to risk? What was he like at Cincinnati and before?
I don't think it was the Everett Golson thing. I think it was just more of an evolution of the offense. If you're going to run a ball control offense, which Notre Dame has kind of turned into in recent years, especially in 2020, you can't turn the ball over. You can't. And I think that's really been a thing where I would imagine that what happened with Everett late in 2014. I mean, that was when he had it was like 5 turnovers against Arizona State. Like 2 of them got ran back for touchdowns. And then almost still brought him back. Wasn't it like 34 to like 14 or something like that at one point? 34-3 at one point, I think is what it was. And he brought him all the way back to 34-31 and then had that pick and it just was over. Or no, Arizona State ran a wheel route to their running back and Brian Van Gorder, your boy, and then threw another pick. And so, yeah. It was but yeah, I think that's probably, all of it factored in, but I think at the end of the day, it was more so, Vince, just about the offense that they ran.
Ian Timmerman apparently wants to be a producer, which is fantastic. Yeah. We'll take it. He says, I got an idea. If you ever do Football 101 again, different run schemes and how they work.
That's on the list.
And what top teams run them.
No, you know what I like about that is I was just going to kind of focus on Notre Dame's run schemes, but I think so we can do Notre Dame and then we're like, okay, let's break down the couple top plays for Oklahoma.
Yeah.
What do they do? Because they're more of a counter team, right? Mm-hmm. They're more of a GT counter scheme type of situation. And then Alabama, what do they run? What's Ohio State? We'll explain pin and pull and things like that. So that'd be a lot of fun. I think what we might do, and I don't know if Vince is going to be able to do this with me or not, but I think we may do some of those at night. That might be more fun as opposed to sort of the day shows. But we'll see. We'll see how we can fit it in, but that'd be a lot of fun.
T. Stewart, is it possible that Kelly wants to use more complex offense at Notre Dame because he feels there's an advantage that his players are smarter than other college football players?
Possibly. But here's the counter. My counter argument to that. But they have to do a lot more in the classroom with community service and all those other things than other players do, right? So I mean, they don't have that. Let's put it this way: Notre Dame's players have a lot more non-football related obligations than they do at Alabama. That's just, I mean, there's that's not disrespect. It is what it is. It's just facts. I know people that have taught at Alabama. It's just a fact, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It's just the reality of it. And so I think that's even more. And now with the NIL stuff, Vince, I think it's even more reason that these kids need to be more. You need to simplify things a little bit more because they're going to have even more things going on, more things distracting them to be able to go that. Vince is totally zoned out right now. He's not listening to anything we're talking about. He's just looking for questions. Like, it's so obvious. Like, I'm like, Vince, hello.
Well, I'm listening, but yeah,
you're hearing me. You're not listening.
Wow, that's a really good. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
you're listening, but you're not.
You know, you're allowed to answer questions too, Vince. I
know.
There's a lot of things you got to work through.
It's a lot of chatter about the podcast with Freeman and Zorich, which is awesome. Just looking for some questions. That's all. You know.
I think we had somebody, Mike Padone, said had a chat earlier tonight.
Did you find it? Because I
think it's one of the ones that got bumped up, but Mike signed up for Blue and Gold. So signed up, not for Blue and Gold, but he said he signed up for a membership.
Good.
I don't know if he did the blue or the gold one, or if he just signed up for a normal one, but he said he signed up for a subscription. Beautiful. So I appreciate that.
If I find it, I'll throw it up.
Very much.
I'm trying really hard not to get bumped down to the bottom again.
Yeah. Vince is really trying hard. He's not even locked into answering questions anymore. Just focused on finding the next one. This guy has a purpose.
I mean, I can't stand the silence, man. Like, I gotta get.
Yeah, I just got a text
ready.
saying that he signed up for the gold package, which is
nice.
That means that was a big one. So
that's awesome.
If that's true, I mean that is amazing.
Joe Salvatore says, loving the content lately, guys. I apologize if I'm late on this one, but what's going on with Schrouth? Any news?
Yeah, so there's not a lot of news. I think he's just sort of in a decision-making mode of, do I want to stay home or do I want to go where I think at the end of the day his heart has always been, which is Notre Dame. I think I think I think Notre Dame needed to close on him and convince him to go away from home. And I don't think Jeff Quinn did a good job with that. I don't think he did a good job to say, hey, look, you know where this is where you need to be. This is where you want to be. This is where your mom and dad want you to be. Make the decision, but everyone else around you is trying to tell you to stay closer to home. And I think when you're in that kind of community, that kind of town where there is a lot, it's like Ohio kids have this issue of going to Ohio State, you know, but you got to give them a reason to leave. And I don't think Coach Quinn did a good job with that. I think Tommy Rees and Brian Kelly are doing a much better job with that. And I think that is one of those things that I think in the end is going to give Notre Dame a chance, where it was looking like he was going to go. He had told other people that he was going to go to Wisconsin. Just like he had told people for a while he's going to go Notre Dame. And I think that Kelly and Reese have done a good job of getting him back in on it,
which is great.
And I think at the end of the day, I think that's ultimately where he'd like to be. It's just you've got to give him a reason to get it done. And they're in the ball game now. Where 2 weeks ago it was not looking great. So,
I remember seeing the look on your face when we were talking about him. It was not a good look. So
yeah.
We got a super chat if you want to hit that,
Shelton,
Brian.
I mean, he already hit us up with one. Now he gave us another one. I appreciate that. Mike Padone said I signed up for the gold.
There it is.
Wow.
There it is.
Wow. Shelton Hager, thank you for the super chat, buddy. I appreciate that very, very much. Who would you say the biggest hire on the coaching staff during the BK era besides Van Gorder? Also, what's y'all's favorite players of all time at Notre Dame?
So he's talking about somebody that was hired that was not a good hire.
Yeah.
I know you've got a list in your head.
Can I pass on that one because that's a current coach?
Oh, Brian. Shame.
I'd say the biggest of non on the current staff, I'd say the biggest miss of a hire was probably bringing Charlie Molnar in to be the offensive coordinator.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
And then Van Gorder's the other. But I think he rectified that. And when Chuck Martin became the offensive coordinator, it's not a coincidence that team went 12-0. And they weren't a great offense, but they did enough to win the games. And that's also someone that Brian Kelly trusted. I think that's why the offense has worked so much under Mike Denbrock, is because he trusted Mike.
Sure. And
he let Mike do certain things. I don't know if he ever necessarily had I think he liked Chip, but he didn't know Chip. And Brian Kelly is one of those people that he's got to know you on offense to trust you. And I think that's a reason why I'm cautiously optimistic that he's going to let Tommy Rees go because I think there's a trust there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
I know you have my back. I know you want the same things I want. I know, you know what I mean?
Right.
And that's another reason I'm cautiously optimistic about that. So, but those two defensively, it was Van Gorder. And I think for the most part, I think Brian Kelly's made some really good hires. I don't think Autry Denson was a bad hire. I think when it was clear that Autry Denson, I think the Brian Kelly's biggest problem is there's only been 2 bad hires he's made. The other hire, the Biss, is more of a who you had a chance to get, and the fact that I think you settled for someone. It's a good coach, but not an elite coach. And the guy I know you could have had, it would have been an elite coach. So it's a little different deal. The issue has more been about when you make a hire that at the time is a good hire. I mean, Autry Denson as running back coach made a lot of sense at the time.
It did.
But when it proves very early that he's not putting in the work and he's not doing the things and he's not invested in recruiting and those type of things, you need to be able to get out of that problem faster. I mean, look, Nick Saban's made bad hires. Urban Meyer's made bad hires.
Sure.
But Urban Meyer got out of those hires after a year or 2. Brian Kelly tended to let those hires last a little bit longer. That's been more of a mistake. But for the most part, if you look at his list of hires, I mean, he's made some really good hires. Ed Warner's a good football coach. It's his first O-line coach. Replaced him with Harry Heastand. Good coach to great coach, you know? I mean, you look at Mike Denbrock, bringing Mike Denbrock back. It's a great hire. Bringing in Chuck Martin, getting him away from Grand Valley. Great hire. It's worked out. Mike Elston, bringing him in, keeping him all these years. Great hire. I thought Keith Gilmore was a good hire to defensive line. I think, again, their bigger issues were the defensive coordinator. Coach Elliott, you know, who's since passed away. But that was a great hire to bring him in to replace Chuck Martin. I thought Kerry Cooks was a really good hire. When he hired him as in the corner, I think Bob Diaco was a good hire. Bob Diaco built 3 straight top 25 defenses. And remember, he inherited a freaking train wreck of a defense. And in year 1, made them a top 25 defense. And in year 3, made them a top 5 defense. I think Del Alexander was a good hire. I don't think he's panned out the way that I'd hoped, but I'm still optimistic that can get changed. I think that hiring Lance Taylor was a really good hire. I think hiring Marcus Freeman was obviously a home run. The Mike Mickens hire last year was a great hire. So he's made a lot of great hires. I just think the issue has been the couple times he hasn't made the great hires, which everybody does. He's been too slow to get away from that. That's what I think the bigger issue has been.
Sure. Tim Hatch has an interesting one about NIL. It says, should or will the Notre Dame Athletic Department intentionally connect with their alumni in order to set up the process of procuring PR work for athletes, which can be used as a specific and potent recruiting tool? I think
imagine so.
I would think that would be something that Notre Dame looks into.
Notre Dame has always been willing to tap into their alumni network,
right? And there's
when it comes
of famous
to players,
alumni, and a lot of alumni that own businesses, etc. And I honestly, here's what I
Notre
think
Dame's
about
alumni
this.
Base is phenomenal when it comes to giving back to the institution and internships and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Here's my thought on that. I think that they will tap into the alumni base more for sports not named football and basketball.
I can see that
because I think that could be a real route to get some of those athletes involved in some of the NIL stuff, where they wouldn't be able to do it themselves.
You know what's the craziest thing? Some of the biggest NIL payouts I've seen so far have been from non-football basketball players.
Yeah,
like there's I think she's a volleyball player at LSU. There's some gymnast I saw that's like got paid buku. There's like a wrestler that got a ton. Like, because they're just like these big names, you know, in this, like these sports that are more individualistic, you know.
Sure.
That's been fascinating to me. But you're already seeing the NIL thing. This is kind of changed the subject. It's a great question, Tim. I'm going to kind of change the subject a little bit. You're already seeing the NIL stuff have a huge impact in college basketball. Evan Mobley from USC just announced he's coming back. UCLA just had 2 guys announce they're coming back.
Because they know they can make money.
Right. Hunter Dickinson at Michigan said he's coming back. Now, he probably would have come back anyway because he was getting like a mid to late second round grade. But you're already seeing guys that were already talking about going to the G League or that other league that are now saying, I'm probably going to go to college now. I think for college basketball, it's going to be good for the game. Because I think we're going to see more stars stay. And I think it's going to then be better for the NBA. Because I think one thing that hurt the NBA is these kids are going there too early. Shaquille O'Neal played 3 years of college basketball. Michael Jordan played 3 years of college basketball. There's a lot of growth, maturity in your game, maturity as a young man, and all those type of things that happen in college that don't happen in the NBA, where your development's coming. So I think these kids staying maybe for a second or a third year as opposed to just 1 or 2, it's going to be great for the game of college basketball. I still don't know I still am concerned about how it's going to be for football overall, but I think it's going to be great for college basketball. We're going to see more stars staying longer because you're going to get a $200,000 contract from Nike or Adidas or Under Armour or whatever else. And I think because I think the kids always they like college, being developed and being the guy and all that. But it's like, okay, I'll stay here, not make any money, or maybe the little side money I'm getting, under the table, or I can do it legally, so I don't have to worry about my parents getting in trouble. I can do it legally, and I can stay and play 30-some games and get developed and be the guy, and then all of a sudden my game is more ready for the NBA. And I think the NBA, if they're smart, they're gonna love this. Because now they're not bringing these 18, 19-year-old kids who just aren't ready to play yet, but they're having to draft them because they're drafting on potential so much more now than they used to. So I think it's going to be good for the game. I really do.
Quinn Kelly, we were talking about Brian Polian taking a head coaching job, and I just wanted to pull this up because I wanted to be clear. We weren't talking about at Notre Dame. He says, I don't think I would want Brian Kelly as Notre Dame's head coach. That's not what we were saying. Or at least that's not what I was saying.
No, we're talking more like like a MAC level job. Correct. Or something like that. We're not talking about him we're talking about him getting a head coaching job somewhere else. Yeah, I think it's more of what we're talking about. I don't know of anyone that's.
There were many comments about that as well.
Yeah,
people saying they could see him as a MAC head coach, etc.
Right.
Brian Denbo, beyond the Freeman interview, I'm hearing quote closing the gap everywhere.
It's a trend, folks. It's a trend.
All I'm saying.
I need to get it patented. I need to get it. I need to get it trademarked.
That way,
if there's any trademark attorneys out there, shoot me an email at brian@irishbreakdown.com, and I'm not joking.
Chad Williams says Lou used to take the team to Plymouth the night before a home game. Never understood that.
Hey, whatever, it worked.
Well, and Plymouth might be a little far away because they stay in downtown South Bend, I do believe, right now. But at the same time, I can understand getting away from the nonsense.
Okay.
I get it. I totally get it.
I want to pull something up real quick that's off the schedule, but it responds to what I just said. David Knight says, why can't college basketball use the mandatory 3 years as well, or just skip college altogether and go trade? College basketball has nothing to do with that. That's not a college basketball rule.
That's an NBA
That's an NBA rule. The reason college players have to stay in the college football for 3 years, or at least be 3 years removed from high school, because that's the rule for the NFL. You're not eligible to go in the draft. I mean, if Kyle Hamilton wanted to go pro after 2 years, NCAA is not the reason he's not doing that. The NFL is. Same thing with college basketball. College basketball has nothing to – I think college basketball coaches would rather you be allowed to go straight to the pros. If you don't want to be here and you're not going to go to class and you go pro, why not? I think baseball, for example, that has the right – that's what I've always said the NBA needs to do is adopt the rule that they have for college in Major League Baseball. If you get drafted, you don't like your draft status, you go to college. But if you go to college, you got to be there for 3 years. And I think there are some rules that you can only be there for 2. It's like I don't know the rules for that, but there are some exceptions. But I think that'd be good. And with this NIL thing, I wouldn't mind seeing the NBA and because they need to work together. Like NBA is so poorly run. This is why I don't watch it anymore. It's not about the players. Some of the politics I don't like, because I don't like anybody's politics, whether you agree with me or not. I want to watch sports, right?
Yeah, right.
But that's not really the reason. I think the NBA is run so god awful. They don't want to have anything to do with the NCAA, which is stupid because that's your minor league system. And so what they should have done and what the NCAA should have done and not been idiots and got to this point where you now are just the wild, wild west because you refused to do what you needed to do. The NCAA and Major League and the NBA should have got together and said, listen, you draft a kid and he doesn't like where he's going to draft it, or you want to say, hey, look, we're still going to give you your signing bonus, but we want you to go to college. Okay? So the NBA team went there. He still got to go to class, got to do those things, but he can go to Duke, and he's going to be there for 2 years, or at least 2 years, and he got a signing bonus, all that kind of stuff. But you own his rights, because remember, the year that Larry Bird led Indiana State to the national championship game against Michigan State, the Boston Celtics drafted him the year before. They held his rights. Now, he couldn't get any money, but they held his rights. So Larry Bird was actually drafted the year before he went to the NBA. So, because the rules were different back then.
I did not know that.
And to me, I would like to see, but they got to work together on that. And now with the NIL stuff where players are now making money, why can't you do this deal? Right? So amateurism, as the NCAA defined it, is dead. And it should have been dead because the way they defined it was stupid. I'm a big believer in amateurism, but not the way the NCAA defined it. It was stupid the way the NCAA defined it, and that's what's led to this. So I think things like that should be on the table where the NBA and the NCAA need to work together, especially for sports like that. Football is a little different deal because the players are never going to allow that stuff to happen. It's a little bit more. So anyway, that's something that I would like to see happen. But the 3-year rule like they have in football and in baseball, that has nothing to do with the NCAA or colleges. That's completely a professional league rule. If the NFL said, look, we're going to start allowing high school kids to go to the NFL, there's nothing the NCAA could do about it. Nothing. And there's nothing they can do to require them to stay 3 years. No, that's the NFL's deal.
We got another super chat, Brian. You want to jump on that one?
John A1. Happy Friday, IB. Which player on the roster who isn't projected to start in 2021 has the highest ceiling? Ooh, isn't projected to start. Oh, boy.
Tyler Buckner.
Yeah, it's a good one. I'd go off the top of my head, rather than off the top of my head, Chris Tyree, Tyler Buckner, Deion Colsey, Ryan Barnes, and
Prince Collie.
Gabriel Rubio.
Yeah,
that's who I'd go with. Because again, Foskey's, highest ceiling. That's just off the top of my head. That's kind of the 5
Prince on your list.
Yeah, but see, his ceiling isn't quite as high because I don't know if he has the frame to be
fair enough
an inside linebacker, and I don't know if he's quite the athlete that. But he'd be on that list.
Okay.
He's on that list. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just trying to think of the highest ceiling.
Yeah, no,
I think Prince has a high ceiling, but I think if Deion Colsey pans out, he could be a top 15 draft pick. I did think he needs a lot of work. He's not that ready-made guy that some of the other receivers are. But remember, too, about Deion. Deion's a year younger than most kids in his grade.
Right, yeah.
One time I said he's a year younger than most kids his age, which makes no sense. But it's he's a year younger than most kids in his grade. Or at least about a year, a little under a year. I mean, technically, he's the same age as most juniors.
Yeah.
So that's why I get so excited about his upside. And look, there's a lot of other kids I could list. I mean, there's a lot of high upside kids. I can't, somebody just said 2007 Domer said Tosh Baker. Yeah, he's one with a high ceiling. Learns those. I mean, there's a lot of guys with high ceilings, but I just kind of picked the guys that I view as maybe could potentially be high picks. Tosh Baker has a high ceiling. The reason I don't put him is because I think his floor is a little bit lower and he's going to need a little bit more work. But yeah, I mean, if you wanted Domer, if you wanted to put Tosh Baker in your top 5, I wouldn't argue with you on that. And I might have him in there if I kind of sat through it a little bit longer. But
sure,
those are some of the guys that I would go with.
Let's see. Tommy Gunn says, guys, how soon do you think until Notre Dame schedules a home and home with the Fighting Club? Well, the problem is the stinking schedule's
already full. There's a couple openings in like 23 and 24, I believe.
Oh, is there?
That they could still do.
But we're seeing announcements for 10 years down the line.
But there's still openings in those years. But I'd like to see them get Vanderbilt. I'm a big fan of Notre Dame playing some of the academic schools. I'd rather play Northwestern than Michigan. I'd rather play Northwestern than Texas Tech. I'd rather play Vanderbilt than Mississippi State. Because I mean, I kind of like that. You're playing them. They're giving you a Power 5 game. Here's a good. I'm going to steal one down here from the beginning, Vince.
No, that's fine.
This I got one to throw. And also because Sheldon gave us a big super chat earlier. But he says, I'm not sure what Brian dislikes more, Van Gorder or the NCAA. That's a great question. It'd be Van Gorder.
I was going to say it's got to be Van Gorder.
Slightly.
Just as a hunch.
Yep. Here's another one. Another super chat from Patrick Barnes. Thank you, Patrick, very much. How concerned are you guys with the lack of receiver development, considering we are changing our offense where they will play a bigger part in the offense? So if they change the offense how I want them to change it, it's actually easier to develop because you're not asking them to do as much.
Right.
And so I think that can allow Coach Alexander to go back to his roots, which was more about development. And that's one of the things I was excited about when Coach Alexander got hired was he was a guy that had very fundamentally sound receiving cores, but I think they ask so much that that's not his thing. And I don't think he does a good job of developing the whole roster. So that's something that he would need to improve upon in that degree. But a more simplified system means you can focus more on fundamentals.
Yes.
And that's what I would like to see Notre Dame do. Now, I'm not saying they're going to do that, But if that's would be a benefit of that, in my opinion.
All right, Brian. So mind you, this comment was put up an hour ago by Brandon. He says, I love Brian and Vince's tenacity and willingness to push through. Both look like they're running on fumes right now. Hashtag rule number 76.
I would put that on a shirt if it wasn't already in a movie.
That's great.
But yeah, no excuses. Play like a champion. If you think I'm running on fumes, you should see my wife right now because she's actually stayed up. She normally goes to bed at like 9 or 10 o'clock. She's been up like 5, 6 o'clock the last couple of nights building this
Just
message
working
board.
on your thing, Brian.
Yep. And she has like 17 clients waiting for her to build them websites.
Right.
But she jumped me in front, so I appreciate it.
Jordan says, can you drop the link for premium content on the YouTube?
Yeah, I will.
Links. Okay.
Yeah. Once we get it, like, I'm not putting the link out right now, Jordan, because we're still, like I said, there's still some kinks we're working out. There's still some things. I got some friends on there now that are testing it and making sure that this works and that works and the other things work. But once we get it rocking and rolling, we'll put all that stuff on there. Absolutely.
And Jordan says, can you make an IB bandana that I can put on my puppy? I have a feeling that might be in the works.
You know what? My wife is actually, so it's really funny that you say that.
I remember you mentioned something about that.
Yeah. So we're trying to find a company that might actually do that. That's more of an actually makes that, but they do sell certain they're actually like those gaiters, that she was working on putting a design so she could get one for our dogs. So I'm going to show you. So this is something that every Saturday. So when I leave to go to the game, this is what my wife, this is actually the backdrop on my screen. So I'm just going to show that. But this is what my wife puts on her dogs every Saturday on game day. So, right?
Ready
so
to
that's
roll.
Sadie on the left, Reed on the right. But so we're trying to get something like that. And that's like some kind of janky thing she threw together. So this blue part right here is just one of those little like flag things that she put. My wife cut this green thing in half, fused them together because she like MacGyvers stuff all the time. And that's what she made our girl. So she's trying to make something like that. So we're definitely working on that for sure. That's a great comment. But yeah, so we're trying to figure out something like that to put for the girls.
Sean Rogers, coffees for closers. Both Vince and Brian are grinding. Both are closers. Thanks for grinding out the week, guys.
Always.
No problem.
That's the one nice thing about being a coach. And I don't know for Vince, I'm sure it was like this too, just different because you had classes and stuff. But, working 14, 15-hour days doing this job is really not any different than what I was doing as a coach. It's just now I get to do it from home.
It's very similar. Yeah.
So the hours aren't the problem. It's just, it's actually a little nicer this way. I get to work at home.
Let's see. Ron, he says, I hate the modern day game. I like the smash and bash. It's freaking football, not badminton. I actually said that to a kid's mother one time when I was coaching her husband, and her husband told her to sit the heck down.
Nice.
Oh, that's great.
Nice.
Oh, that's awesome. Tim Hatch, any chance IB will get to obtain a video interview with Brian Kelly or other assistant coaches?
Doubt it.
Yeah, probably not. Another request for the store.
I saw that earlier.
Oh,
yeah.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah.
Can you create an alternative IB hat with a gold
we'll
shamrock instead of green? Everything I have ND is with gold, and it'll look better with a gold IB with the shirts.
Yeah. I'll look into it. We have one that we kind of changed a little bit. I'll look into it. Right now, honestly, that's my wife. She does that. She does that design. I'm not going to push my luck and try to have her do anything else the rest of this weekend. So, but I will get to that. So I've already gotten a little bit too much out of her this week. She needs to focus on her stuff. But yeah, that's definitely something. Again, like honestly, I didn't even plan on having a store. This store came from you people asking about how I want that hat. I literally just got these hats for me and Vince.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so Vince actually brought up putting kids and baby clothes up when we first started the store. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that, man.
It's true.
So
I was like, I've got kids.
Yeah.
I've got kids.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that, man. I don't even feel comfortable putting the stuff up that we had, And then we had people asking for baby clothes. So it's like customers at. I'm like, okay, sure. We'll do it. But if you guys ask for it, we'll try to do it. It's just
that's awesome.
I don't want to overwhelm people and I don't want to make it seem like we're just trying to nickel and dime you every way we can, because that's not the intention. We never, when Vince and I started this out, yes, the website, the podcast, the message board, and the YouTube were always part of our plans but I wasn't going to do super chats. I had a customer convince me to do that, and And then the store, I wasn't going to do a store because I didn't want it to seem like, hey, we're just trying to get every dime we can from you. But so when you buy things from us, when you give us super chats, please know it is incredibly appreciated.
You have no idea.
And it was not part of our original plan. And, maybe we should have thought more outside of it, but we just focus on football, man. We want to talk football. We're coaches,
We had the blinders on, man.
Yeah, and you guys are the ones giving us all these great business ideas. So,
I know, right?
But I always wanted to grow it. I just never saw it being like that. I never thought there'd be the interest in that. And so when the fact that there is, it's like I've said it a lot and I mean it, it's incredibly humbling. It really is.
Michael O'Brien has a football question. He said, I was wondering, last year Notre Dame didn't throw too many screen plays to the backs. Do you think Notre Dame will throw a few more of these, and is Cone better at this than Ian was?
Yes and yes. I think this, I talk about height really isn't a big deal for quarterbacks. This is the one part of the game where I think it is. Not the perimeter screens, but the running back screens to backs.
The old school, let them through.
You need to either be really tall or short. Like Kyler Murray was good at it because he was so short that he could just kind of get underneath it real quick. I think that's an area where I do think it can hinder a quarterback. But I think Jack Cohn will be better than that. Plus, they ran a lot of screens at Wisconsin. And so, I think they'll do more. I think they'll do a wider variety of screens. I mean, we saw a few of those early last year. I mean, Tommy came up with a really well-designed screen pass to Jafar Armstrong in the opener. Remember that? They faked the reverse to him and then threw it back to him, and he ended up getting down to like the 1 yard line. They had another screen I think they ran against South Florida, and then they kind of went away from it. And then they brought it back in the Alabama game. They ran a screen, and it went for like 27 yards. So I would imagine with that, it's going to be a much bigger part of the game this year for sure. Now the question is, do they have linemen that can block screens? That's another. Like I don't see Kane Madden being a get out on the perimeter screen guy. That was something they didn't do a lot at Marshall, and the times he did, it wasn't pretty.
Mm-hmm. Ladarius, our guy, our resident Bama fan, says Notre Dame is killing it right now. Yeah.
Well, that's been from a Notre Dame perspective, that's been an exciting thing right now. They're beating kids that Alabama wanted.
Sure,
and doesn't happen. That hasn't happened very much in recent years. I think in the last prior to this class, I think the only kids that I can remember, Chris Tyree was one. It was Notre Dame, Alabama, and Oklahoma. There's kids that had Alabama offers, but having an Alabama offer and being a kid Alabama wants is a different animal.
Sure.
So that's been an encouraging thing for me.
And Ladarius has a question. He says, who is Notre Dame's highest rated recruit right now? I assume he means committed recruit.
Right. Depends on who you ask.
Yeah.
For me, it's Tyson Ford, barely over Josh Burnham right now. If you look at ESPN, it's Junior Tuihalamaka. If you look at 247 Sports, it's Josh Burnham. If you look at Rivals, I think it's Tyson Ford. If Jalen Sneed signs with Notre Dame, he'll be the highest ranked on Rivals. He's like 46th on Rivals. I don't know what he is ranked on ESPN because ESPN's got some really weird rankings this year, like some really weird rankings, like just off the wall, like what kind of rankings? He'd be 97, so he would not be the highest ranked on ESPN. He would be the highest ranked on Rivals. And I'm not sure what his 247 ranking is up to. He might actually be. I think Josh Burnham would still be the highest ranked on 247. So let me just check that. Yeah, he'd still be the highest ranked. Josh Burnham would still be highest ranked on 247. So it just depends on who you ask. Let's see here. Where are you at, Vince? Let's see here.
I got bumped a while back, so I'm at the 230 area.
Paul, hey coach, just curious, what was your 247 rating was? I can't seem to find you in their system. So actually, there is a Brian Driscoll. I had a couple people reach out to me. There was a kid from Texas a few years ago named Brian Driscoll. Spelled his first name with a Y, spelled his last name just like mine. He went to Air Force to play running back.
No kidding.
Yeah, and but no, my playing career was well before 24/7. Well before 24/7.
Well before the internet.
Yes. Well, I mean, Rival started in 2002, right? I think is when their first rankings was. I was coaching by then. So I may look young, Paul, but I'm quite old.
Brandon says if Marcus Freeman ever becomes head coach, I feel like he may become a top 5 recruiter. Talking about that list.
Oh yeah,
that we had up.
I mean, if he's the coach that I think he's going to be, yeah, he would be that guy. Yeah, because again, I think the best recruiting coaches are the guys that I don't think the the flashy, I'm your buddy kind of guy really works if you're trying to win a championship. I think that may work at like a certain position, but you know, I'm just not I don't know. I just don't think that works at that elite level unless that's who you are. Like Dabo can get away with it because that's just Dabo's personality,
Sure.
you know, but I think you got to be who you are. But I think most of the successful coaches are guys that understand there's a process and we're expected to be the leaders. I don't need you to be my buddy. I don't need to talk different to relate to you. I'm the head coach. You're the player. I'm going to do everything possible to, you know, I don't need to listen to the same kind of music you do for me to develop you into a great player. Right. We don't have to like the same movies or what, you know, whatever. You know, I'm the coach or the player. Okay.
Right.
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to believe in you. I'm going to push you. I'm going to, when you think you've reached your peak, I'm going to make sure that you understand that you haven't, you know, and I'm going to have a plan to make you the best player you can be. And then you need to know that I trust you. I mean, do you think Nick Saban sits in an office like, you know, busting like some Wu-Tang or anything like that? Tupac? No, he's not. That's not who he is, right? Now, I would have liked that, right? But, you know, so when I talked about rap music with my players, it's because that's what I liked. It was relatable. It was honest. It was real, and they could see that. And then there'd be other guys who would walk in like, hey, is this so-and-so? And they would look at them like, what? Like, did you just say Run DMC? Like, well, you know, you be who you are. And I think kids want that. They want that discipline. They want that push. They want to know that you're going to kick them in the butt when you need to. Now, they may not like it, but ultimately they want that. And I think that's why guys like Saban and Ryan Day and Dabo Swinney, because Dabo's fun and all that, but at the end of the day, he's still a business thing. Whereas Kirby Smart, you know, is kind of that real relatable guy. He's that used car salesman kind of guy that may be able to get great recruiting classes, but he ain't going to win a championship. You know what I mean? At least I don't think he will. And I think that's the difference.
Here's what I'll say as well. Kids can see fake coming away. And that's, if you're trying to be somebody that you're not, and this comes from my teaching background, from my coaching background, kids can smell fake a mile away. So you don't waste your time, man. Just be you. Yeah. That's the most that was the first lesson I learned, is because again, I had good mentors early on, and it was like, look, you're their age. It's going to be the hardest thing for you to do is to separate yourself from them. And it was, because like I could relate way more to the players I was coaching than I could my fellow coaches. I was 23, 24 years old. You know, they're listening to like Steely Dan and like all, and I'm like, what? I don't listen to that crap. My dad's listening to that. You know what I mean? Like I'm listening to the same thing the players are listening to. But you got to be careful that you make sure that you're the coach, they're the players. Line.
Yeah. You got to be yourself, but you also got to make sure that you're you know, that they understand that you're the leader. You're not their buddy.
Domer, Texas. Do coaches ever consult with current players on recruits? For example, if a current player knows a recruit personally or grew up in the same area.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. And honestly, what they also do, Domer, is when you host a kid, they will bring the kid in and say, hey, let's talk about this kid. And I know for a fact that in Brian Kelly's tenure, there have been kids that Notre Dame was recruiting that acted like pricks on their visit. There's no other way to say it. They acted like jerks and had some really bad things to say. And like, you know, I'm all about this, I'm all about that. And then they'd interview the players afterwards. Well, what'd you think? How'd it go? And they say, look, coach, man, that guy doesn't fit who we are. That guy's not looking for what we're about. And Notre Dame stopped recruiting him.
Yeah.
If you can't get along with the guys in the locker room, and then they would talk to other guys, you know, make sure that this wasn't just a beef between two kids, but they'll talk to kids that were around them and say, I mean, I've heard this has happened. Yeah, coach, man, that we don't want to play with that guy.
And I also
explain why, and you move on from him. You don't recruit.
Right. And the thing is, if you then as a coach continue to recruit that kid, now you've shown your own guys that are already in your house.
He may not fit us, but he's really good. Right.
So kids will be like, yeah, you don't want to listen to me, so fine. You know,
well, and then you tell me I need to act a certain way, and I'm like, well, you let this guy get away with whatever. And
exactly.
And I think that's a lesson Brian Kelly learned from 2016 as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because I agree with that completely. That's a good analogy. Jacob Watson, do you think BK is a national championship caliber coach? What will it take for him to win one? More recruiting, more attacking offense, or different coaches, or a little bit of all of that?
This is a great question.
It's a great question.
Brian Kelly, as based on what he's done at Notre Dame, is not a national championship caliber coach. Brian Kelly, in his most truest form, I believe is a national championship caliber coach. I think if Brian Kelly could go back to his time at Cincinnati and Grand Valley and take the best parts of him there, and then mold them in with the parts of him that have become more of a CEO, which is a good thing. That's not and kind of combine those two things. I think Brian Kelly can win a championship. And I think the version of Brian Kelly that we're seeing now, being more involved in recruiting, because here's the deal. At Grand Valley, at Central Michigan, Cincinnati, the head coach has to be around all the time. He can't be going, you're not going across all over the country doing speaking engagements when you're head coach of Cincinnati because nobody cares. You're driving to the coaches conference an hour away. You're doing, you know what I mean? Like you're going across and driving an hour to Kentucky and speaking at some booster club. You're not going out to California, New York, and all these other places and getting all this money and having all these, Notre Dame's a different animal. And I think Brian Kelly at times kind of got more into that than he was about, I need to be here.
Right.
And so if you can take that part of him and bring it back, and if you can take the explosiveness, let's let it all hanging out, because there was no pressure to win at Cincinnati. I mean, he was doing things at Cincinnati nobody had ever done before, and Central Michigan was like, they were a terrible program. There's not the pressure at Grand Valley State there's a Notre Dame, right? And I think to a certain degree, I think Brian Kelly gave into that pressure a little bit. And that's why I think the question we had earlier about, is he turnover averse? I think those mistakes, I think some of the blowback he's had for the times he has crossed the line on how he conducted himself on the sideline, how he went at TJ Jones, not just the manner in which he did it, but then also if you understand what TJ was going through in his personal life at that time. And there's just all these different things that you're like, man, that you got to be better than that. But then you don't go to the extreme of then you're not, you're still not who you are. So I think Brian Kelly in his truest form can win a championship at Notre Dame. And we're seeing him this offseason taking steps to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an encouraging thing. Now, the final step for me for that question is, I think the final part to me is obviously offense. I think the offense part of it is there. They've got to be a more explosive offense. He's got to go back to his roots of being willing to attack. And I think the other part of it is he's going to have to either do one of two things with some coaches who aren't doing a good job. A, you got to sit down and have a come to Jesus moment with him. And that would always be my first option. As long as a coach isn't just like, this guy doesn't belong here. He's not cut out for this. Or he's doing things that are just like, you conduct yourself that way, you will not be here. Right. And there's been coaches like that. I'm not a big fan of just firing a guy because he didn't do a good job one season. Sit down and say, look, man, let's have a come to Jesus talk, and I need you to do this, 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 and this. And if you can't do that, then I'm going to find somebody else who can. And then, and I'm going to give you I'm not going to be looking over this is what I'm expecting you to do. Now go get it done.
Right.
And so that's what I would do with Jeff Quinn. That's what I do with Dell Alexander. I would not fire them. Right. And I've been critical of both. Here's what I need you to get done. You do whatever you got to do. If that means, coach, I need a GA to help me with this. If I need I need a tight ends tackles coach or if whatever the case may be, whatever you need to get this done, that's what we got to get done. And then go do it. But that's the expectation. And if you don't meet it, I'm going to have to find someone else who can. You have to have that, but then also not be that guy that just rips them on the practice field all the time.
Right.
And then where you undermine them and now the players don't respect them. Can't do that either.
Can't do that at all.
And so those are the things that I look at and I say, is he capable of it? Yes, but he's going to have to make some of those changes. But you know what? Dabo Sweeney had to make changes.
Mm-hmm.
Urban Meyer had to make some adjustments as he went from Utah to Florida. Nick Saban had to make some adjustments. I mean, I remember watching that Alabama team against Utah, and that 28. I felt the 2008 Alabama team was more talented than the 2009 Alabama team. And they went and played Utah and got embarrassed. They didn't want to be there. And I think that humbling experience resulted in some changes for Nick Saban. Not major, but tweaks. And it caused him to go out that next year, and that team was run different. They didn't have Andre Smith. They didn't have some other talented players, but they were a better team in 2009. I think all coaches learn and evolve and have to make adjustments. Nick Saban has seen the future and realizes he can't score 33, 35, 36 points a game again and win championships. He's got to score 40 plus. And so he's evolved. He's not running the same offense he did his first, 4 titles. And Brian Kelly's also got to evolve and make changes. And I think he's capable of making the changes to be a national championship coach. I absolutely do. He's just now got to go he's gone all in recruiting.
Yeah.
Now he's got to go all in a couple other areas. And if he does those, Jacob, I do believe Brian Kelly's capable of winning a national championship at Notre Dame.
Kenny Moore has got a comment about recruiting. He said Zach Rice said in an interview that he does not think he can develop, let me start over. Zach Rice said in an interview that he doesn't think anyone can develop him like Notre Dame. That's huge.
Big time. Now, we could argue whether that's accurate or not, but it doesn't matter. He just has to believe it, Ladarius, he said Moore chose Notre Dame over Alabama, and it was Alabama and Florida where it was do I carry this into the fall and give them another look, or do I go to Notre Dame? And he chose Notre Dame. The other one is Benjamin Morrison is the other one. He's going to decide this upcoming week between Notre Dame, Alabama, and Washington, and so he's another one of those DBs that had an Alabama offer, and Alabama wanted from all accounts.
Tommy Gunn's working on some revisionist history here. He says, if Kelly had gone to the NFL after 2012, who do you think would have made up the short list for his replacement? Were there any obvious choices?
I honestly don't even remember.
You're going in the Wayback Machine, man.
Yeah.
That was 9 years ago.
Yeah.
I honestly don't remember either.
You know what, though, Tommy? Ask that next week, and I will do some research. Because I remember, I'd have to go back and think. I remember there were some names at the time that people looked at, but I don't think Kelly. I think there was a better chance Kelly went to the NFL a few years later than 2012, in my opinion. I think that was about leveraging and posturing.
Yeah. Larry Friedel, how many coaches' salaries are currently endowed by alumni and other donors? So that would be the so-and-so head coach at Notre Dame, the so-and-so family head coach, or whatever the case may be. How many football? Because
I know there's at least 4: head coach, coordinator, both coordinators, and the DB coach are all on there. I'm trying to see. So Brian Kelly is. Let me find football here. Let's see here. Brian Kelly is the Dick Corbett head coach. Marcus Freeman's the Bob Hinton defensive coordinator. Tommy Reese is the John and Bobby Arlotta family offensive coordinator. Okay, so there's a 6th. So Pat and Jana Eilers, defensive backs coach, safeties. That's Chris O'Leary. And then Mike Elson is the Bob and Leslie Moore family defensive line coach recruit. Yeah, so there's 6. So head coach, coordinators, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 that are currently in
out of 10. 5 out of 10 that are paid coaches.
Well, technically 11 because I'm counting Brian Kelly as part of that.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
10.
Because remember, they're up to 10 assistants now. It used to be you can only have 9. Now it's 10.
Right. So, Brian, let me ask you how that works. Are those people that you had mentioned, are they paying the entire salary or are part of? Do you know how that
I don't
works?
know. I don't know specifically.
Okay.
It depends at different places. Some places it's just
curious.
Sometimes it's just you give us a flat sum. You give us $1 million and we'll name it after you or something like that. Or you give us 5. I mean, it can be different. It can be, hey, your endowment is going to pay this salary for a period of time. But I mean, I doubt that the certain family is who is it, the defensive coordinator one, right? The Bob Hinton. I doubt that family is say, okay, for the next 50 years we're going to pay you this much. I imagine it's sort of
I agree.
It can be different things, but it's probably a good chunk of money up front, and then that's probably where it comes from. Is just my guess. That's a guess.
Yeah, Ian Timmerman has a good question. He says, "What do you think of Cincinnati's replacement for Freeman?"
And Coach Trustle's a good coach. I think that's going to be more about Luke Fickell, running it the way Luke Fickell wants. But I mean, he was D coordinator at Michigan State for a minute, and he's someone that coached with Fickell at Ohio State, so he understands the system that they want. I think they'll be able to keep it running, but. I think Marcus Freeman had it's kind of like you can bring someone in to run the offense Joe Brady ran, but it doesn't mean he's going to run the offense like Joe Brady ran it, and that's kind of how I feel about Coach Stroud. They'll do real well this first year because they're going to have so much talent, but you're going to slowly see a little bit of a coming back to earth moment, in my opinion.
Jay has a recruiting question. Brian, with offensive tackle George Fitzpatrick trending to Ohio State and expected to commit soon, how could that affect Wagner's situation? So a little guess on your part.
I think it could help Notre Dame with Wagner. Right? So I think it could make it to where, your top contenders possibly gone now. I think the question for Notre Dame is you now have to decide what you want to do. And if you're Notre Dame and you say, well, we're battling for Billy Schrauth and we think we got a legit shot with Zach Rice. If you take Emil Wagner, you're going to have to tell one of them no.
Ooh.
And I don't know if that's something you want to do. And I don't think I think that if it were up to me, Jay, I would say, Emil, we love you, but right now we're not in position to take you. And I would say, I would go to Jeff Quinn and Tom. If I'm Brian Kelly, I'd go to Tom Reese, say, let's figure this out because we need to get one of them.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to turn down Emil Wagner, we better get at least one of these guys. If we turn down Emil Wagner, we don't get one of these guys. Somebody's getting fired. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you can't go 0 for 3 there.
Right. But then you also can't take Emil Wagner and then miss on the chance to get 2 guys that are just flat out better players either.
Right.
I mean, so you don't need 5. You can get away with 4. So then you say, okay, we're just going to take a meal and then we'll just hopefully get one of those 2 guys. Well, what if you could get both? I mean, that's the kind of risk to me.
Yeah.
If you really want to take that next step, that's the kind of risk you need to take to get the best of the best. But then you better flip and get it done. That's the other part of it. Because if you miss on both of those guys, then you're really screwed.
So is 5 not an option for Notre Dame?
It's an option, but to me, you already have 3.
Yeah,
I would say to go to 5, get both of those guys.
5.
Because
Okay,
if you
so
take
6
Wagner,
is not
that's
an option.
4. No, it's not. If you take Wagner, that's 4. It means you can only have one of the other 2.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'd rather shoot for the other 2, knowing you're okay if you only get 4. Is how I would say it. But you better get one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Then there was another recruiting or comment above. I wanted to pull up Brandon's comment. He said, if Benjamin Morrison chooses Notre Dame, it will be over Bama as well. But more importantly, Washington, because they've given us recruiting problems with DBs. And I'll say this, that's 2 of the best defensive back coaches in the country.
Yes. Yeah.
When you look at Nick Saban and Jimmy Lake. Now, they're both head coaches now, but they are 2 of the best identifiers and developers of defensive backs in the game. The fact that Benjamin Morrison is looking at those 2 schools should tell you everything you need to know about Benjamin Morrison. And if Notre Dame can win this one, it's going to be huge. Huge.
This is a funny comment. We were talking about Notre Dame spending more money on coaches and stuff, and Patrick McGrain says Notre Dame is spending more money because they're done paying off Charlie.
Wow, well done.
That's great. That's awesome. I had to get that one in there.
Tip of the cap. I'm giving you a golf clap. I'm giving you whatever you need, except a standing ovation, because that would be weird.
Yeah. The camera be in a weird place then.
Yep.
All right. Wait. I'm just saying. Wade Garrett says, do future schedules of Notre Dame enter into the thought process of who may play this year to get ready for harder seasons? And the hashtag, Brian, you're not going to like it. It says hashtag Broncos stink.
Wow. You hurt my heart, Wade. You know how to cut me deep. You cut me deep, man. I think it should. I think if like, hey, our September next year's brutal, let's make sure that, whenever we can, some way, shape, form, or fashion, that we're getting guys ready to go because we know so-and-so is going to go pro next year and that kind of thing. Like, I think that factors into it to a degree, but I don't think it necessarily changes your whole philosophy. I think it's one of those things like, hey, we got to really make sure that, we get Tyler Buckner some action. If Jack Cohn is, in fact, going to be gone after this year, we need to make sure we get Tyler some work, maybe a little more than just mop-up duty because, we can't afford to go get our brains beat in the opener. Hey, we need to make sure we get some of our young DBs work that can factor into it to a degree, but I don't think it's necessarily a situation where you're going to change your whole philosophy. Because at the end of the day, next year doesn't matter if you don't beat the teams you're playing this year. That's your main goal is you got to beat the teams you're playing this year.
Shelton Hager says, who's y'all's favorite Notre Dame player of all time?
I forgot to ask that other part of the answer there.
I'm sorry.
Remember that? No, he asked that earlier as part of a super chat, and I completely forgot to answer the second part of his question.
Gotcha.
Sorry about that, Shelton. Vince, you want to go ahead?
Well, so for me,
do we have the same? No, we don't. Yours is a little later. Sorry. Go ahead. My bad.
No, you're good. So for me, Rick Meyer was my first Notre Dame favorite player. I had his Seahawks jersey when I was a kid after he got drafted. So I was a big Rick Meyer fan. It's unfortunate he went all the way to the West Coast because, back in the day, you weren't seeing any of those games. So I had no idea what was happening with Rick Meyer. I believe he was Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, Rookie of the Year's first year at the Seahawks, and then after that, it wasn't so good. But I had an old tattered Rick Meyer jersey in my closet for a long time. But then after that, it fell onto those 05, 04 teams. So Brady Quinn, Jeff Samardzija, I really love those guys. I was helping to call some Notre Dame baseball games back then. So I remember the game where, blue gold game where Jeff Samardzija went from the blue gold game over to a doubleheader that Notre Dame was playing in baseball, and I was helping call that game. I called some of the football game and then the baseball game, and so that was like a really cool day for me. So that kind of group was when I was really getting started doing the covering of Notre Dame. And so Quinn, Samardzija, those guys are high on my list as well. Mine's the Rocket. I love Tony Rice. I love Todd Lyde. I loved Chris Zorich. Jerome Bettis, Reggie Brooks, Tom Carter, Bobby Taylor, Brady Quinn. I had a lot of guys I love, but the Rockets always had a special place in my heart. He was the most exciting player I've ever seen. I still wish we could have seen him play in a different era. If he could have played in like this recent era, the spread era, oh my gosh, he'd have been so much fun. If you think Reggie Bush did crazy numbers in that kind of pro style offense, you should have seen the Rocket, because Rocket was Reggie Bush, but a tougher runner. If you ever watched Rocket, was hard to bring down, but he was the most explosive player I've ever seen in my life. I mean, Will Fuller, as great as he was, he doesn't have Rocket speed, and that's saying something, because Will Fuller ran by everyone.
OC Irish fan says, guys, after watching Marcus Freeman on Chris Zorch's podcast, the offensive recruiting team needs to use his script. I'm so excited to watch our defense in 2021. Go Irish.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brian Denbo, when you said I was hearing you but not listening. No. He goes, you hear me, but you're not listening. He's definitely a married man.
Yeah. Yeah. But here's the thing. I use that more as a coach than I have as a husband, or that my wife has used with me.
Yes, no question.
That was a phrase I used quite often during my coaching tenure. No question.
No question. No question. Go ahead. You see something?
No, I'm just thinking about that. It's just really
okay.
funny.
All right. David Knight says, Usher, you hear me talking, but you ain't listening.
Yeah.
These are facts.
Yep.
Oh, here we go. Keegan McLaughlin says, what if any areas does the program need to make to join other elite programs? Love the podcast. Only issue I have is BD coaching at Wittenberg, but that's D3B from Wabash. Just kidding. Love it.
Hey, you know what? I have a friend of mine coaches the O-line at Wabash now. I got respect for them. The one thing is, he got real mad when I'd say that they were an all-boys school. He goes, it's a school for men. Same thing. It's an all-boys school. There are no girls there.
That's true.
But I'm 1-0 against Wabash, just FYI. So just saying.
A lot of guys from up here go to Wabash, actually.
When we played Wabash, their head coach, we played Wabash in 01, beat them in 01. It was a low-scoring game, but their head coach was Chris Creighton, who's now the head coach at Eastern Michigan. So Wittenberg dominated that league when I was there. It was a few years later, not that much longer, that Wabash became the best team in that league, and now they're kind of, my understanding is they're a little bit more back and forth now. Can't find any questions, huh?
Well, not yet. Talking about Wittenberg, Tommy Gunn says, Keegan, my first high school coach, is also coached at Wittenberg, just not the same time as Brian. Quinn Kelly wants to know who the coach that you're talking about on the current staff. They're like, yeah, he's not going to say it. Which is
I probably shouldn't have said what I said. I feel bad about that, but
it happens.
It's true.
There are a lot of comments about who other people think you might be referring to, but a lot of comments, like
that's
way more
why
than
I shouldn't
I
have
thought
said
they were
it.
going to be. David says, why can't college basketball use the mandatory?
We talked about that earlier.
Yeah, you did. Yep,
yeah.
Sorry.
David Knight did have another. He said Ross Browner and Willie Fry series bookend. So if you ever wanted to get loose emoji fired up, I've said before there were two things. There's one thing you could do, and that was bring up the 1973 Orange Bowl or Sugar Bowl against Alabama. This is his favorite game. But if you really wanted to see him, if you start talking about Ross Browner and Willie Fry, that would get Lou fired up. He loved those guys. That's when you could kind of. There's only a couple things, Vince, that I could bring up, and I could get Lou to stop working. And that was one of them.
You just put
Lou,
everything down.
If I just wanted to get him to stop typing or something, hey Lou, how good was Ross Browner? And he'd go on this long, exposition of how great Ross. And he's like, and he wasn't the only one. Really frightened. You seem excited, because Lou was just always so focused on work and putting out the magazine, and he just was he worked so hard, and he was just so prolific. But you could get him fired up. That was one of the few topics you could get Lou fired up on, was talking about Ross Browner and Willie Fry and those defenses they played on. And then how good they could have been the year that Ross Browner I think was suspended was another one.
Bruce Shearer says, does the Freeman Cincy recent connection or the Cone Wisconsin connection bring more incentive to those games for either side? It's a part of it. It's a piece.
I think that's. So I've been in these games before, and for people, so I'll say this, Vince.
Go ahead.
People say this, once the game starts, that doesn't matter. Bull.
I agree with that too.
Because it does. I'll tell you an example. 2004 at Christopher Newport, we played Salisbury University in the playoff. Well, if that name sounds familiar to you, Vince, that's because that's where I played. And my head coach was the head coach there. And you don't think I wanted to beat him? They were 10-0. It was the best team they'd had in 20 years. And they were undefeated. We were at their place. And I've never wanted to win a game so bad in my life. And so that was the one game that year where our head coach listened to everything I told him to do. It was the only time all year he listened to everything I told him to do. I think we passed for like about 285 yards, and we beat them. We beat them at their place. And, so it just, I was pulling because I knew their defense, and this kind of relates to that question. So I knew that if they played a lot of cover one. And if you went twins into the boundary, they would go corners over. So what we did is in our base personnel, only in 21 personnel, so 2 backs, a tight end, and 2 receivers. So what we did is we went twins into the boundary, but we put our running back in the slot, and we put George Jones, one of our receivers, in the backfield. And they didn't know. So we were split backs with a tight end. They went corners over. So we motioned George Jones out. He's our fastest receiver, and he just went ISO against a safety, and we threw a touchdown.
Yeah.
But I knew that because not a lot of teams that they played against did that, but I knew that because I remember when they would do that to us in practice. And then a couple times. So those kind of advantages can certainly help you.
Yeah.
But in that game, the talent was relatively equal. They actually had a little bit better talent than us top to bottom. They had a quarterback named Dustin Johnson who was a phenomenal athlete, and they ran an option offense. But we beat them 35-24. And I remember after the game walking across to Coach Wood, and he said, I tried to tell those coaches on defense, you're going to have something for us. Damn right. So I don't know if winning a championship that year would have meant any more to me than winning that game. And then to do it in the playoff at that place where I played on the field I played on, that stuff matters.
It does.
So you like to say when the game matters, you can turn that off, but you really don't. I mean, it's you focus on the job at hand, but there's a little extra something behind it. So and it's usually more for the individual as it is opposed to the whole team.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's going to mean more for Jack Cohn than it is for Wisconsin. It's going to mean more for Marcus Freeman than it's going to be for Cincinnati. And I think that's one of the areas where I think Notre Dame has a little bit of an advantage.
No, I'm there. Look, my experience is different because it's high school, and I am coaching where I grew up. So I've played against my former high school. I've played against high schools where I've coached, all of those different things. And sometimes the kids get on board. They're like, yeah, coach, we want to win this one for you, that kind of thing, which is
for them,
totally
it doesn't
awesome.
matter once the game starts.
It really doesn't. When it's over, they're like, hey, we got it for you, coach, or, something like that. But that's not what they're thinking about, and it's in the back of my head. And it's, like, for example, I always wore a certain shirt underneath my jersey when I was in high school, right? It's just what we did. So I wore that same shirt under my coaching shirt that day, and then we beat them. And it was like, yeah. And I showed the head coach. I was like, hey, check out my shirt, Yeah, it's little stuff like that,
But it meant a lot more to you than it necessarily would have all those other players. Because once the game starts, they're worried about getting hit in the mouth,
100%. And especially as a coach.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. No question. Ladarius wants to know, do we ever talk college basketball when basketball season is here? Look, we're a Notre Dame channel, so we talk Notre Dame basketball. I don't know if you realize Notre Dame basketball was terrible.
Well, also, we didn't really get our podcast launched until February. I mean, our YouTube channel, we did a little bit in January, but not a ton. We didn't really launch it until late January, early February.
We talked to Tom Noy a couple times.
We had Tom on a couple times, but by that point in time, the basketball season was basically over.
Yeah.
But no, we'll do some basketball stuff. And Vince, we'll have Tom Noy on. We'll try to do some interviews. Now, we will always be predominantly a football podcast.
Yeah.
When we talk basketball, it'll be more of just big picture. And as analysts and fans, we won't get into I'm not going to be breaking down Mike Bray's scheme or defensive philosophy just because I don't know basketball like that.
Right.
But we'll stick to the things we know. But we both also like following college basketball.
And we both like to highlight, certain Notre Dame sports, things like that. So we'll try to have some people on, do some cross stuff. But yeah, it's predominantly football.
Yep.
Quinn Kelly, is the left tackle battle Tosh Baker versus Blake Fisher? Tosh has been on the right side.
Well, both. Part. I mean, he started on left and then went right. He's done both. But I think right now Tosh is more grooming to be the next right tackle. Would be where I would say it would be right now for me. I want to bring up this question from Chris Sally.
Oh, Is it the one? Yep. My cursor was on it.
A
Yep.
lot of my non-Notre Dame fans always say that Notre Dame plays a weak schedule. Do you think that is a fair criticism? No, it's not. In fact, the last year's schedule was one of the weakest Notre Dame has played in a long time, and it was an ACC schedule.
Yes.
Look, here's the thing that people don't understand is, number one, Notre Dame doesn't often play like Bama, Clemson, Ohio State, right? That's just the way that it – again, those teams don't necessarily want to play Notre Dame either. Notre Dame does have a Bama series coming up. They have an Ohio State Clemson series. But more often than not, what makes the Notre Dame schedule challenging is, number one, the depth of the good teams. Now, they've played some schedules in recent seasons that haven't panned out and been as good as we thought they would be because some teams were down. Florida State in 2018, you look at the 2018 schedule, and it wasn't a great schedule. You had Michigan at the beginning, was really good. But then after that, it wasn't a great schedule. If you'd have looked at that schedule in 2014, you're like, you guys got Florida State coming up in 2018? Man, that's going to be tough. Well, by the time 2018 rolled around, Florida State sucked, right? So, I mean, that's the kind of thing that factors into it as well, is you don't always know how good teams are going to be when you're scheduling so far out. What's Bama going to be like in 2028? We don't know. What's Notre Dame going to be like? We don't know. So I think those things factor into it. But no, Notre Dame does not play a weak schedule. And the other part that people don't factor in enough is this travel. And, the fact that you look at 2015, Notre Dame played 1 week they're in Notre Dame. The next week they're in Boston. The week after that, they're out in San Francisco, out near San Francisco, playing Stanford. Who else does that? Nobody does that. And so that factors in too, especially when you're doing those things in November. And you look at the end of the 2017 season, you had to go down and you flew down to Miami to play a top 10 team. You come back home, play a triple option offense that, most of those teams don't play. Then the next week you got to fly out to San Francisco to play Stanford, right? I mean, who else is doing that? That also factors into the challenge. So those are usually people who are jealous or don't know what they're talking about. And so, and I would say the weakest schedule that Notre Dame has played in the last 10 years is the one they just played, which was an all-conference schedule. Tommy Gunn says, I don't understand the 3 years.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. I don't understand the 3 years removed rule. Romeo Aguirre could have been a pro at 19, obviously an exception. Well, he could have been a pro at 19 because he was in college for 3 years at that point in time. And the rule basically is you have to be 3 years removed from high school to be from your graduating class to be able to go pro. Right. Now, sometimes that can mean you go to prep school for a year and then go to college for 2 years. But you have to graduate. You can go to you can go to Hargrave Military and then be in college for 2 years. Those are the way those things work. But that's an NFL rule. I mean, you could not play anything. You could
go work out
semi-pro ball for 3 years, but you're still not eligible for the draft until you're 3 years removed from high school. And it's not about age; it's just about how many. Because Romeo was 16 when he graduated high school. That's what Tommy's getting at.
Crazy. Brian Meadows says, I listen to other Notre Dame shows and podcasts, but since January, it's hard to listen to other shows. I listen for a minute and I get bored because y'all already explained everything. Great show.
That's what we try to do.
Thanks,
That's what
Brian.
we try to do. Appreciate that very much.
Appreciate
that very much.
That's awesome. A lot of burrito discussion. I don't know if you're seeing a lot of that.
Burrito discussion?
Yeah. Somebody put in there, and I remember it was way up to the top, Chipotle or Hothead. Have you ever had Hothead?
Never heard of Hothead before.
See, and a lot of people hadn't. I have not heard of that.
The debate
either.
I've ever had is Chipotle or Qdoba.
Yeah, that's
when we lived in Colorado, it was Qdoba. The Qdoba where we lived in Denver was phenomenal. The Chipotles were Here, really? Chipotle is still just okay, but the Qdoba has been very disappointing so far. The one they just opened up recently. I'm hoping that it's kind of like working through the new store kinks, but the couple times we've gone, it hasn't been that good.
I feel like they're both very similar. I mean,
they are
similar.
But like that's why I say it's got to come down to how well you're run.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So, yeah. I got one. You got one, Vince?
If you got one, hit it.
Yeah, Patrick Bird said, hey, late to the show, so you've already discussed, sorry for asking again, what is your take on the new offense analyst and recruiter from Tennessee? So just a quick reminder, Patrick, we don't know a lot about him. So I don't want to say, hey, go back and listen again. I don't know much about Dre Brown, so I can't comment on that. The main takeaway from that is just the idea that they're doing it in general and they're making these, expanding the staff and growing the staff, I think is a positive. If he's as good as I'm assuming they think he is, then that's a great move. I just specifically can't speak much about him.
Brandon says Freeman had some very interesting stories about recruits in the Zorich interview, and respectfully, but unfortunately didn't say the names because I'd love to know who he was talking about. He had some great examples of how impactful Notre Dame is as an institution and about targeting the kids who are great fits at Notre Dame, but just need a chance and need to be convinced. Kids that aren't necessarily Notre Dame guys.
That's what you have to do, because some kids are Notre Dame kids, but they don't realize it. They may not necessarily have the profile. Again, I point to Chris Zorich and Tony Rice as great examples, Prop 48 guys. You know, the story that Tony Rice told in one of those interviews about how some dad saw him in a basketball game and told his kid, like, don't be like that guy. That guy's not real smart because he was a Prop 48 kid, and how that crushed Tony. But you're not going to find many, better, more Notre Dame guys than Tony Rice. Got his degree and still lives in the area and all that, and loves Notre Dame.
Great guy.
And
great guy. Yeah. Absolutely.
So, and Chris Zorich, similar situation. So, it's Notre Dame guys aren't always the obvious ones. And that's what it sounds like. Again, I got to listen to the interview, but from what people are saying, it sounds.
I'm excited to listen to it, actually.
Yeah.
Jordan jumping back in about the schedule. You were talking about playing educational institutions. He said, but I thought you don't like playing Stanford. Why is Northwestern and Vanderbilt better? Or is it that you just like to rotate it?
What I've said about Stanford is I don't like playing Stanford every year. I don't think they need to play. So to me, USC and Navy are the only two schools that Notre Dame has to play every year. I don't mind playing Stanford. I just don't think they need to play Stanford every single year. What I've said in the past is I'd like to play Stanford like 4 to 6 times out of a 10-year stretch. Maybe you play a couple home and homes and then you take a couple years off working another Pac-12 team, right? Working at UCLA, working at Washington, working an Arizona State or something. Whoever, Colorado or something. I don't know. Pick a Pac-12 team. That's all I'm saying. I don't think you need to play them every year. I wouldn't want to play Northwestern every year. I wouldn't want to play Vanderbilt every year.
Right.
It's more about just, scheduling some home and homes where maybe you go down to their place to help him out. Like, what it could be good for Notre Dame is, hey, look, Clark Lee, we'll play you, because if Notre Dame comes down to Nashville, you're going to be selling, you're going to be making some money. You know what I mean? That's going to be some draw. So it's, even though he probably knows, we might give y'all a little bit of a whooping, although the last time Vanderbilt and Notre Dame played, they didn't. But so those things can help. Or, hey,
Sure.
Coach, can we set up a neutral site game? Maybe just play once, a neutral site game down in Dallas, because we're really trying to get into that Texas market. Maybe you do something like that. But I'm all for playing the academic institutions. I just don't want Notre Dame to play any of them every year. I don't want to play Northwestern every year. I don't want to play. I like the variety.
Yeah.
But Stanford would be on my schedule 4 to 6 times out of a 10-year stretch. I just would like to see some, just working in some other teams from time to time.
And there's other ways that you can do the whole end your season in California thing. There's a lot of schools.
I don't think they need to do
California.
that anymore, though. That's my thing. Is that's a relatively new tradition that I don't care if they get away with. I would prefer them to end the regular season at home, personally.
Sure. Yeah.
More.
No, I get that.
USC on the road to end one year, and the next year you end it at home. That's how I would do it. Why do you have to end every regular season on the road? I don't.
It was
think
a thing for a while, and I don't. Yeah, that was like they wanted to make that happen.
Yeah.
But yeah. Let's see. Ladarius says, I know y'all Notre Dame fans hate Michigan. Do y'all remember what you were doing when App State upset Michigan in 2007?
Well, honestly, Ladarius, Notre Dame fans can't really talk a lot of crap about what happened to Michigan in 2007, because that was the worst season in Notre Dame football history. So I don't think a lot of people, but yeah, Notre Dame fans can always say, what? I don't care what happened to y'all. I don't care that Michigan, I don't care that you guys beat us 38-0 that year. You still lost to Appalachian State. So
I still enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I don't remember where I was, but I remember
you were watching the Georgia Tech game is what you were doing, and you were thinking, oh my God, this year is going to be awful. In the opener against Georgia Tech, you realize this team is going to suck.
Yeah.
I thought that was going to be a decent team. I'm looking at some of the young players, and you had some, you had some guys come up, and I'm like, this team, and they were so good the 2 years before. And then I'm watching the Georgia Tech game. I'm like, oh my Lord, I was so wrong about what I think this team. I was like, I think I might have picked like 9-3 before the year, and I'm like, that's
not going to.
That's not happening. Not happening.
David Knight says Vincenzo and B. Drisk. Kyron Williams wears the gut shirt. I remember the days of Chris Zorich, Tony Smith, Eric Simeon, Sean Smith, and so forth. I would love to see the team wear the high cut jersey. I think those are illegal now. Remember they, what was it? The kid from Ohio State who plays for the Cowboys now, the running back.
Ezekiel Elliott.
He had to pull his shirt. He was wearing it up, and then he had to pull it down because it's illegal to show the midriff anymore. And I think it's for safety reasons.
The things that the NCAA works that gets worked up about.
Right. Yeah,
hilarious.
I completely agree with that. That was Larry says there was no girls at Notre Dame until 1972.
That was like 6 years before I was born. I think, Larry, didn't you go to Notre Dame during that period of time? I believe so. I think he was like 67, 71, something like that. I'm curious, Larry. I think Larry's a Notre Dame graduate. So, which means Larry was a much better student in high school than I was. So, Ladarius said Alabama went 7-6 in 2007. We was bad too, and you weren't. I'll trade your 7-6. And I think they lost to like Louisiana Monroe that year or something like that, right? I think Bama lost to. I'm going to look that up. I think they lost to like somebody pretty bad, but I'm going to look it up. I think it was like Louisiana Monroe's. I think is what it was. Let me look up that game. Yeah, Louisiana Monroe, 21-14 at home. Yeah, they weren't that good that year, but you went to a bowl game and won a bowl game. I would have loved to have been 6-6.
Go to a bowl game
at the end of the regular season, 2007 season. No question about it.
Keegan has a comment here about playing against people you know. He says, once the game starts, it's on and got to play against friends in high school and college. Love competing against them. Your buddy is right. Wabash is a college for men.
How about it's an all-boys school?
So how about Coach Creighton for wide receivers coach?
I think Chris Creighton's pretty happy with where he is now.
I guarantee
he's doing a really good job at Eastern Michigan.
And he signed an extension not that long ago. And the only reason I follow
he's not turning that down to come to Notre Dame.
The only reason I follow Eastern Michigan is because one of my kids went there as a running back, and now he's a grad assistant. So enjoying life up there in Ypsilanti, Michigan. Coach D Walk, first post, love your show. You mentioned a few days ago that Notre Dame could have an elite run defense. If we're bouncing between third down and fourth down, or 3 down and 4 down fronts, do you anticipate us being elite versus playoff teams?
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why. I mean, look, here's the thing, and Coach, I'll tell you, I'm not someone who believes that you have to run this, and this to be successful. The only thing that I think is limiting to a championship is the option. I think that's the only thing, because I don't think you can necessarily recruit the personnel at a place like Notre Dame to really have the athletes to go be successful in that offense. And I think the option, once people figure it out and they see it year after year after year, it's why I think Navy has gone down since they've been in that league. They were really good at first when people haven't seen it, but now people see it and it's less effective. I'm a believer that you figure out what you like, what you know, what you can teach, and then find a system that you can also then recruit the best potential to.
Yeah.
Whether that's a 3-3-5, but it's also got to be a system that's sound and aggressive. And my issue with 3-3-5s in the past is, and this is what he's kind of getting to, is a 3-3-5 in the past was almost basically daring people to run because you didn't want them to throw. It's like, look, we want you to run. We just don't want you to throw for 500 yards on us. And so you could kind of gash those teams. And that's why I say you look at the Big 12. And when I first heard that Cincinnati was going to a 3-3-5, I was like, well, I'm not going to like Marcus Freeman now. Because I kind of was looking at him when he got hired at Purdue and, just a young and up and coming. I always like find those young and up and coming coaches that you kind of say, what's this guy going to turn out to be? And I was like, I'm not going to like that. And then, you look at it and you watch, you say, this isn't your typical 3-3-5. Yeah. This is someone who's kind of thinking outside the box a little bit. It's an aggressive downhill defense. They were very good against the run. You go back and look at what they did to Georgia last year. I mean, look, Georgia's pretty good football team last year. I mean, I'm pulling up Georgia's numbers now. Georgia ran for 174 yards a game. You look at they were the 2 weeks before they played Cincinnati. They ran for 332 yards against South Carolina. They ran for 316 yards against Missouri. They ran for 45 at 1.9 yards per carry against Cincinnati. They ran for 145 against Alabama. And Cincinnati held them to 45. The problem in that game is they gave up some big plays in the pass game, but they held them to 24 points. Cincinnati. And so because of the way he teaches it, it is a downhill aggressive 3-3-5, and the 3-3-5 allows him to be more multiple in how he attacks. So a linebacker can hit more gaps from where he's lined up than a stunt than you can with a stunt. And essentially, Vince, it's like this: is if I have 4 down on my weak side. Right. So if I have a 3 technique, let's say we're going with an under front. Okay. So in the boundary, I got my 3 technique in my end and I got a stacked linebacker. Okay. And then my mic now is over a little bit. Now, if I'm in a 4 down, I can do some stunts with those, but those always make me a little bit nervous because if you catch that stunt the right way, we're getting hit hard.
Oh yeah.
What I like about it, the way that Marcus Freeman does his 3-3-5 is he's going to use that linebacker to crash. Well, that linebacker can hit a lot more places and he can hit a lot faster than a stunting defensive tackle. So instead of having your end slant and your D tackle come here, you're having that end slant and you are crashing hard with your linebacker. You're covering the same gaps that you covered before. You're just doing it with a better athlete and you're doing it in a little bit more aggressively, but it's still worried about making sure that all the gaps are occupied. That was not the case. Like we would play some 3-3 stack teams when I was coaching, and it was like I loved it when we played those teams because they could not stop the run at all. But this defense is different because it is so aggressive attacking gaps downhill. It's not a bend but don't break defense. It is a we're coming at you. They're going to slant their lines. They're going to hit their linebackers. They're going to have a fourth guy inserting into the line on every play almost, especially against teams that run the football. And so, but I also think being also a team that can be in 4, you're probably going to see them be in 4 more against Wisconsin than you will against USC. And so I think that flexibility, but a lot of times you'll see them in that out of the same personnel. So do I think they can do that against elite playoff teams? Yeah. And honestly, we've seen Marcus Freeman do that. I mean, we saw him do that last year against Georgia, where they shut the Georgia run game down. But here's the thing. He didn't play 3-3-5 much against Georgia. He was in a 4-down front almost the whole game. They were in a 4-3 personnel to start the game.
Yeah.
So they got into some 3-down stuff, but that flexibility allows you to adjust what you're lining up in to adapt to the quality of your opponent. And I think that can be difficult, but if you're good at it, then I think it can make you very, very difficult to stop. I mean, you look at some of the things they did in the run game last year. I mean, they held Memphis to 5 yards rushing. That's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Thomas Walsh says the other chats also are boring. As they not only don't know as much, the passion is not there. Coach and Vince have ruined others for me, and I could not be happier. That's hilarious to me. We've ruined other people for you. That's great. So thanks, Thomas. We appreciate that. Chief Brody, of the 4 biggest games this season, Cincinnati, Wisconsin, USC, North Carolina, which of these would hurt most for Notre Dame to lose for you guys? For me, North Carolina fans were really annoying last season, and Cincinnati being a group of 5 and at home.
You got to be careful about those teams that aren't used to being good at football. They don't know how to handle success.
That's true.
And that would be North Carolina fans. To me, it'd be Cincinnati because it's a group of 16.
That's absolutely.
Yeah. And it's
where their stature is, and it's a home on top of it.
Look, I think they're one of the 2 or 3 best teams Notre Dame's going to play. But it's the way I've always said that. So why did Notre Dame play Boise? There's nothing in playing Boise for Notre Dame.
Right. Yep.
And this is what, look, if you lose to them, you get crushed. If you beat them, that's Boise. You're supposed to beat them. It doesn't matter how good they are.
Mm-hmm.
So there's really not a lot of value for Notre Dame. And I mean, if you beat Cincinnati, it's like, people are, oh, it's a good win. But, they're a group of 16. They're not really a great team.
Mm-hmm. Jordan says, love Friday mailbag, best of the week. How many commits do you think for next week? I'll how about 1.5? Give me an over or under, Brian.
I'm not doing that.
All right.
There's only 2 kids that are supposed to make announcements next week. So if I answer that question, I'm going to basically be giving away the answer. So
all right, fair enough.
I wasn't born yesterday, man.
I was trying. I was trying to help you out, Jordan. Sorry. Did my best. All right, let's see.
That very next one. Just pull up that very next one.
Oh, the next one? Okay.
Yeah.
My all-time favorite player was Coley O'Brien. How after Terry Hanratty was knocked out of the game with Michigan State, did a good job in a 10-10 tie. Then the next week beat USC 51-0 in LA
to secure a championship. Yeah, that was the 1966 season.
Yeah, right.
And here's the other thing: I was watching a YouTube video on this recently, and apparently Coley O'Brien had just gotten I think diabetes had just kicked in. Like he had some kind of his body, because diabetes can just kind of come on, and so he was battling that when Terry Hanratty got knocked out of the game.
Perfect timing.
And they had to come back against USC. So it was a really fascinating story. And so if anyone, he was getting interviewed by, I think it was Tim Brando? I can't remember who was by, but it's really fascinating. If you're someone who likes Notre Dame history, go find that Coley O'Brien interview. I think it was with Tim Brando. Maybe, yeah. I can't remember who it was, but it was really, really well done. And they kind of do some of the backstory of what was going on with Coley O'Brien at that time. It was really fascinating. I'm curious, Michael, if Michael's actually related to him, the similar name, but it's a really fascinating story.
Brian Meadows says, I think Jack Cohn will be great because he can run and he goes through the reads. He's poised in the pocket, sits back and throws the ball, and he can get it out quick.
Yeah, I think the one thing Jack Cohn has to really focus on this year is there are times when he holds on to the football just a little bit too long, waiting on things to come open. He's got to have a little bit more. Hey, it's not there. It's okay to hit that check down. And that because he had, I think I counted about 3 or 4 times he got stripped from behind on a sack because he was just waiting on guys to come open, just trying to make a play. And those are the kind of mistakes you say, hey, look, that's not a good mistake.
Yeah.
Really trying on 3rd down to make a play, and it gets tipped and picked off. And, we'll talk it through. We'll coach it through. Maybe you should have gone somewhere else. But the strip sacks are the ones that you can't, look, just dump it off to Kyron. Dump it off to Mayer. Dump it off to Tyree. If it's not there, again, you don't want to overdo that to where he's looking, captain check down. You don't want that stuff. But I mean, there'd be times in practice, Vince, it'd be so frustrating watching being under practice. I remember one time there was like 8 straight plays where Ian Book threw to a check down. I'm like, that's where my captain check down thing came. And it's like, what are you really accomplishing right now in practice? Okay, right. Ian Book. No, but then you write the practice. Well, Ian Book completed 80% of his passes today. Oh, he threw 8 straight check downs. I'm being a bit hyperbolic, but it's just like that's
time, not so much because I was there too.
Yeah. Yeah.
John Long knows his way to coach's heart. He says, coaches, who is your favorite college basketball team? # go Reds.
I'm not commenting on the first part of that question, but go Reds. Go Reds.
All right. Well, I'll say it. Notre Dame's my favorite college basketball team. And I pay a lot more attention to college basketball when Notre Dame is good. And so I didn't pay a whole lot of attention the last couple of years.
Yeah. So, I always enjoyed watching Notre Dame basketball. They're not my per se that they weren't the team I grew up watching, but I'm not going to get into that conversation.
I think I know the answer. I'm not going to say it, but I think I know the answer, which is why you're not saying it.
Move right along.
I know.
Michael O'Brien also had a comment here. To me, Ross Browner and Willie Fry in my lifetime are the best all-time bookends. 1973 national champs and 1977 national champs. So that was the interesting thing because I believe Ross Browner's last year was supposed to be 76, but he got suspended for a year, correct? And then came back. I think that's how that all happened, but that's why there was so much gap between their first year, their freshman year, and their 5th years. So they both played in both years, I believe. Michael could correct me if I'm wrong, but that was one of the things Lou used to talk about with me a lot.
Jack Foote, have you seen the recent pictures of the team in the sand? Audric Estime looks intimidating.
Yeah, he's a big boy.
Yeah, and you've been touting that for a while now.
Yeah, he's a big boy. I just hope he can still run because he's gotten even bigger than I thought. Yeah.
Talking about that 2007 Notre Dame team, 2007 Domer says, I was in the stands for the Notre Dame Georgia Tech game. With smartphones not really being a thing yet, it was hard to get updates. One guy had a radio, and that's how we heard the good news.
About App State beating Michigan.
App State, yes, exactly correct.
Yeah. Yeah, and Ladarius said that year that App State beat Michigan was the same year that Louisiana and Monroe beat Nick Saban in Alabama. And Notre Dame was 3-9. Very, very strange year. Very strange year. So who won the title in 07? Was that the year LSU won it? I think that's the year Les Miles and LSU won it. They beat Ohio State. Yeah, because 06 is when Ohio State won it with Troy Smith, right? Oh, no, they lost it to Florida. They were people thought they were going to win it. They thought they were going to smack Florida. But Chris Leak and Florida beat them. In 07, they went back. I think Todd Beckman was their quarterback. They went back the next year against LSU. And had that really good running back, and LSU smacked them pretty good. So, yeah, that'd be the year that LSU won the championship with, I think, 2 losses.
Okay. Quinn Kelly, predictions for the starting offensive line, left tackle to right tackle. Go, Brian.
I'm going to go Blake Fisher, Rocco Spindler, Jarrett Patterson, Kane Madden, Josh Lugg, and I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, me too.
I hope that Jarrett Patterson's not at center, but that's the latest I heard is that's going to happen. I hope it is I hope it's Fisher, Patterson, Carell, a combo of Kane Madden and Rocco Spindler or Andrew Kristofic, and then Josh Lugg. That's what I hope it is.
That I would agree with that as well.
And then Quinn had a question earlier that we passed over, and asked why I'm so down on Jeff Quinn. I'm not necessarily down on Jeff Quinn. I I think Jeff Quinn's a good guy. I think he's a good football coach. I don't think he's an elite offensive line coach. He hasn't proven that to me yet. And last year, I have some reasons why I'm not completely buying the hype from last year. I think there were some other things going on that led to that success that weren't just about him. We'll see if that's true or not. You got 2 preseason All-Americans on your team, right? You've got one of the best freshmen in the country. You've got, your other 2 starters are guys that have started football games. There's no reason to take a big step back. And if he can keep them from not taking a big step back, then I'll say, okay, I'm higher on Jeff Quinn. But right now, and it's not just the film, it's also things that I hear and information I've gathered. It just there was a big drop off in quality of coaching and quality of recruiting when Harry Hiestand left. And my bigger issue isn't even about Jeff Quinn. It's about who you could have had instead. I mean, Joe Gilbert, who was the offensive line coach for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year, is the guy that I know Chip Long wanted, and there were some other Notre Dame players that felt that he was the guy, and Brian Kelly went with Jeff Quinn. And so that was part of it for me too, is the sting of who I thought they could have had and how that would have worked. So, but again, I think Jeff Quinn's a good football coach. I've never said Jeff Quinn's a bad football coach, ever. It's just, I mean, at Notre Dame, you have to be the best. You have to have the best there.
You have to be elite.
And that's the issue.
Richard McGinnis says USC needs to man up and play us the last game every year, or last game of the year every year. Are they afraid of the cold? With global warming going on, that shouldn't be an issue.
Hey, Richard, I don't know how much time you spend in South Bend, Indiana, but I mean, that global warming thing that everybody talks about doesn't seem to be real when we're sitting there in late November, early December in South Bend, Indiana. So, but no, that's absolutely what it is. It's the cold.
Quinn says his grandpa was very upset when Notre Dame let girls in. So I thought that was funny. Okay. And you asked when Larry graduated. He said he graduated in the spring of 71 with Theismann and Austin Carr.
That's a couple giants, especially Austin Carr, man. Goodness gracious.
Austin Carr was Superman.
I mean, we have these GOAT conversations. Is there any debate about who the GOAT is in Notre Dame basketball?
No.
Is there any debate there? I don't think there is, right? I mean, that would be Austin Carr, no question about it.
Chief Brody says, I do miss beating up on Michigan State, to be honest. No desire to play Michigan ever again, however.
Yeah. Here's a question that we kind of passed over that I thought was interesting. Domer Tech says, are you surprised gamesmanship with recruits like what Braden McGregor did last year doesn't happen more often? No, I'm not surprised by that, because I think that there's a lot of people involved in these things that are smart enough to understand that is not something you want to do.
What happened?
He basically told Notre Dame he was thinking about coming, and he was telling Notre Dame recruits that he was going to pick Notre Dame, but he had already recorded a video and already told Michigan he was coming, and he did, he kind of did some dirtiness. Most kids have more class than that, and also most high school coaches and parents have more sense than that. And also, if you're a high school coach, the last thing you want to do is limit options for your future kids.
Yep.
And next time that guy has a player, you think Notre Dame's going to be like, let's gung ho go get this guy. No, and so most coaches are smart enough to know, and most kids appreciate the schools that recruit them. Most kids, it's a hard decision to do that. The last thing you want to do is tick them off. That's why I really despise the whole throw the hat down thing, and why I think you're seeing less of that now, because I think kids realize, do you realize, much like most parents have more sense than that, and most high school coaches have more sense than that. Even if maybe sometimes teenagers don't, because I remember being a teenager, I probably would have done a lot of dumb things my parents weren't telling me. No, you're not doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Omar has a great question here. He says, I missed the first few minutes of the show. I'm already a subscriber to the IB website. Will the message board be a separate subscription?
No. If you want to subscribe through SI, and I'm still working out the logistics of it with SI, but if you want to subscribe to SI, you can subscribe to the SI part if you want to get the magazine and all that, and you will get logged on the message board. Don't do it just yet, Omar. That's going to be one of the things that we're going to get taken care of here soon. I'm still working with SI on that, but yeah, if you have already signed up through SI, then do that. But I'll tell you what, Omar, do me a favor and shoot me an email on that, and I'll kind of give you an idea of kind of where we are. And if any of you are subscribers to the site already through SI, you will not have to buy a new membership. This is we're going to honor that first. But if that is the case, and you are a member and you are already a subscriber of the SI site, shoot me an email at brian@irishbreakdown.com, and I'll kind of talk you through what the steps are to make that happen. That's a great question.
Liam Gaming says, with serious too deep depth from front seven and increasing in the defensive backfield, wouldn't that make it easier to up tempo for the offense? I mean, with that depth, the time of possession should be a factor, right?
Shouldn't be a factor. I don't think time of possession matters much anyway, but I think Liam's question is really important. One of the things you have to do sometimes if you don't have depth on defense is you have to be cognizant of, hey, they've been on the field a lot. But when you're playing 20 to 22 guys on defense and sometimes more, you can do that because, hey, look, we're right on the field. So put your twos in on the defensive line. Okay. And then the next series we'll have the starters back on the D line, but then we'll put a couple twos in at the linebacker. I absolutely think that can be a benefit of the offense. And it's not so much about the up tempo, but more willing to say, hey, look, if we can score on 80, then we're going to score on 80. Sometimes as an offensive coach back in the day, especially when you didn't have the depth, and Vince, I'm sure it's like this in high school because you definitely don't have the depth. Yeah. You say, hey, look, they've scored quick twice. You guys have scored quick twice. We're trying to make adjustments, and you guys are going for 7. We need a drive here. And you have to game plan. Say, hey, look,
could you hand it off to the fullback a couple times,
right,
please?
And now you're still trying to score, but maybe
sure.
We're running a couple bootlegs to move the chains, and But if you've got the kind of depth that you need that Notre Dame has, then yeah, go tempo. But see, the other part of that I talked about, it's not just about depth. Sometimes it's, hey, they're doing something, and we need a couple minutes to figure this out. You know what I mean? So give us some time here. Maybe you'll call a timeout on offense or something like that to give us a little bit more time. When you get in the red zone, maybe you do something. You know what I mean? We need some minutes because we gotta finish these adjustments because they just threw some crap at us that we weren't prepared for. And so that's part of it too. And if you're going tempo all the time, it can make it a little tougher on the defense to kind of have those in between series adjustments. But from a depth standpoint, then you're absolutely right.
I didn't know if you wanted me to go with those or not.
No.
Okay. I know exactly what you're laughing at. I wasn't going to touch it with a 10-foot pole, but I didn't know. Okay. Because there's some really good comments after that too.
Yeah.
About that. But
I'm not talking about the girls in school one. I'm talking about
not either.
Okay.
I know exactly what you're talking about. So Tommy Gunn says Audric equals possible second coming of the bus.
No. Audric's a good football player. Jerome Bettis was considered an elite recruit coming out of high school. He wasn't Audric's a good football player. Could he become it? I mean, anything's possible. I wouldn't have thought Tyler Eifert would have been Notre Dame's best tight end in the last 20 years. But no.
Jack Wood says, what's your ideal schedule for Notre Dame?
That's a good question.
I would say in generalities, because I mean, I'm not necessarily to go like, this one, but like I'm fine with dabbling in 3 of the 5 Power 5 conferences. Okay, so 1 to 2 of like in that regard. I have no problem with a MAC school on there. I have no problem with that whatsoever, considering what some of these other teams are playing, like Appalachian State, etc. So I'm fine with a MAC school. I would be very upset if they took USC and Navy off the schedule, so they have to be there. And I'm fine with like one big, like I'm okay with like a neutral site big game to start the season off. Like I'm okay with being a part of those kickoff classics, things of that nature. So I guess that's kind of how I would set up the schedule. And then I would have, the bye week during midterms.
I would try to do that.
I would try to do that every year.
That would have been worked into my contract with the ACC. We're going to,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mine would be obviously USC Navy every year. Those are the 2 rivals I want to play every year. 5 ACC opponents, that's 7.
Oh, yeah,
so with my next 5, I want to play an academic school every year. That's a Northwestern, that's a Stanford, that's a Vanderbilt, that's Air Force, that's Army. Like it, it can be
sure.
And there's other programs like that, that have really good academic reputations. I would want to play them. I'd want to play a Pac-12 team. So I'd probably have like a 6 and a 6 year and 10 years, a 6 year with Stanford, maybe 4 with Stanford, then maybe 4 off and then 4 on and then 4 off. And then those 4 offs, I would play a UCLA. I'd play a Washington. I'd play another Pac-12 team. I'd want to have a Big Ten rotation. Sometimes it's an Ohio State, depending on what your other schedule looks like. Other times it's an Indiana. It's a there's some Big Ten teams I don't care about playing. I don't care about playing Illinois, but I'd like to play Indiana. I like playing Purdue. I like Michigan State. Penn State, working Penn State on. I could not give 2 rips about ever scheduling Michigan, which I've made clear. And then I'd like to have a MAC type of school, and then another good game, a group of 6 team. So not too bad, like not a bad group of 6 and a
But
bad,
like a Cincinnati,
like
like this year.
But a Cincinnati, a Tulsa, a group of 6 that's pretty decent, but not like necessarily UCF. But that would be my schedule. I would go for.
Yeah.
And then sometimes those Power 5 teams are going to be a team you're going to smack. I don't necessarily care much about playing the Big 12, to be honest with you, but I think that with that Big 10, you could make a Big 10, Big 12 sort of combo kind of deal, where you say, hey, maybe for two, maybe you're doing you have 3 home and homes with the Big 10 Big 12, and then you've got 4 years in a 10-year stretch where you're just doing one-time neutral site games.
Yeah.
So we're gonna home and home with Indiana. We're gonna do a home and home with Penn State. We're gonna do a home and home with picking up Maryland or something. And then we're going to do 4 home games every other year. We're going to have, we're going to play Oklahoma in Dallas one year. And then we're going to play, Ohio State or Iowa State in a neutral field. And
Sure.
then maybe you can work in something else. I would do things like that is what I would do. And one packed Big 12 team I'd like to see Notre Dame play. I'd love to see Notre Dame play TCU in a home and home. I would. And if I had to pick another Pac-12 team that I was going to play on a more consistent basis, it would not be Stanford, it'd be UCLA.
Okay. Sean Higgins says he's late to the party, but he just signed up for the board. Appreciate you fellas. Welcome to the party. Ladarius wants to know if you believe Alabama has a chance to repeat. Alabama always has a chance to repeat, at least in the last since Saban's been there.
Well, I think it's going to look a little bit different, though. I think that's the interesting thing about Saban. Saban's been able to win different ways. I mean, that 2017 Alabama title team was one of his worst teams the last decade. I mean, there were teams that didn't win the national title would have smacked that team. But they took advantage of a down year of college football, and they did what they needed to do to win. I think last year was all about scoring. I think their defense was down. I think this year their defense should be better. They're not even though they lost Patrick Surtain and a couple other players, I think losing Dylan Moses could end up being a positive. I think he was more of an athlete than he was a football player. Guys like LeBron Ray were banged up last year. You've got the young kid Anderson that's an edge rusher. He'll now be a sophomore. He has some really young linebackers I think are up and coming. Christian Harris is going to be back, but I think the secondary, is going to have to get figured out. Losing Surtain hurt. But I think the defense overall should be a lot better this year. I think Alabama's going to run the ball a lot more this year, too. I think they got some really good young backs. You got Trey Sanders is coming back. You've got Kamar Wheaton. You've got Robinson. You've got some good backs. So I think they're gonna look a little bit more like they did in the past early on to protect the redshirt freshman quarterback, Bryce Young, who's very talented, but you got a bunch of new receivers. You lost Devontae, you lost Jalen Waddle. Mechie's back, Slade Bolden's back, but you're not going to have the elite receiving core you had a couple years ago. You're going to have some really good backs. Your offensive line's losing a couple good players, 3 good players really, but you've got some really good players stepping in. So I think they're going to look a little bit more like a traditional Bama team this year. My big concern with Bama is this year is more so it's not the personnel losses on offense or defense. It's losing Sarkisian and Kyle Flood and then replacing him with Doug Marrone and Bill O'Brien. I think Doug Marrone's a real good offensive line coach, but I think Doug Marrone, this is a stopgap for him. How invested is he going to be in really developing and recruiting that position? And I think Bill O'Brien's one of the most overrated offensive minds in the game.
Well, I think it's a stopgap for him, too.
Yeah, but I think he's an overrated coach. He's
Sure.
not Steve Sarkisian, in my opinion.
Sure.
So I think that's going to hurt as well. And he's he's not a guy that I would want coaching my young quarterback. We'll just leave it at that.
Quinn Kelly says, is it bad for me to be a bit nervous for the FSU primetime? I would tell you to go back and listen to our FSU preview podcast that we did on Wednesday. Check that out because we talked a lot of Florida State.
I'd rather you be nervous than overconfident.
Yeah, that's fair. I might be overconfident. I don't know. And then Sid Irish actually responds, says, no, I worry about first games, especially with a new offensive line and a new quarterback. Fair enough. Absolutely.
Yep.
And then Quinn has another question that we actually answered in the mailbag.
No, he went even further.
Oh, yeah, you're right. He wasn't just safety. Kyle Hamilton chances to be the best defensive back Notre Dame has ever had.
He's got a chance. That's going to be tough. I mean, because if you're going all the way back to like Luther Bradley, and I mean, you're going all the way back. You're talking about Todd Light, who was a 2-time All-American. You're talking about, Bobby Taylor. I mean, that's the list right there. Jeff Burr. I mean, if Lou Samoji were with us, he'd be like, "Hey, let's talk about Luther Bradley." He'd go through he'd go through a long list of guys that played even before. So, mean, to be the best all time at a position like that at Notre Dame is going to be tough. Does he have a chance to do it? Sure. But the other thing is most of those guys played 4 years. Not all of them. Bobby Taylor didn't, but Jeff Burris did. Harrison Smith played 5. I believe Luther Bradley played 4 years. So, I mean, does he have a chance? Absolutely. Will he become that? I mean, that's going to be tough to do. But I don't even care. As long as he's the best safety in 2021, that's all I care about.
Yeah, Richard McGinnis says if he were to stay for 4 years, maybe in the conversation, just playing 3 years, no way.
It just depends on how he plays. I mean, Kyle Hamilton goes out this year and just has an all-time great season and Notre Dame wins a championship. He's going to absolutely be in that conversation. But that's another thing that a lot of those guys have is they played for championships, or they won championships. Not Harrison Smith, but the guys before.
2007 donor says Johnny Lujack played DB and he won the Heisman, which is true. But he won it as a quarterback. But it's all part of the conversation. I totally get that. Oh, my gosh, Jeff, right in the wheelhouse here. Where do I get the IB gear? Brian, can you help a brother out?
Yeah. So, Jeff, if you I believe I've entered it into the thing now, but if you go below in the description bar down below, you'll see the Shop for Irish Breakdown gear. Now, there's when we launched the new site, some of the new gear we added was taken out, so I got to put that stuff back in. So you may want to wait till tomorrow. But if you go to our website, you'll all of our gear will be there. And our ib.irishbreakdown.com, the site that I gave out for the message board, the store is also linked there.
Yeah, it is.
And so that is there too, Jeff. So you'll definitely be able to see that there. So like I said, a lot of this I'm still not necessarily ready to launch all this because we're still working on some kinks. So again, just to remind y'all, I'm not going live. I'm not putting this out on Twitter. I'm not doing all that stuff yet. This is for y'all. If you want to jump on early, go for it. But we're still working out some kinks. So just give us the weekend to kind of.
All right. Last question here. I think Lacey says, any thoughts on Jay Brunell winding up at Yale? And not necessarily for that part, but the next part, I don't know much about Ivy League football. Is that a place that you think he's a good fit and can find a lot of success and think about the NFL?
Sure. I mean, if he's good enough to play in the NFL, they'll find him. I mean, they'll find him.
They don't care where you went to college.
For me,
Fitzpatrick went to the Ivy League, right?
Yeah. Who?
The quarterback
played at Harvard. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's been some Ivy League guys. I think for Jay, what I care most about is that he's finding a place where he's happy.
Yes.
And he's finding a place where he's going to be able to succeed academically and find a place where he's going to be happy playing football again. And I don't think that his focus should be on the NFL. I think his focus should be on getting a phenomenal education, which probably will at Yale, and just getting a chance to play football. And that's the big thing is, look, some of these kids focus on the NFL, and I get it. I do. If I was a top recruit, I would have probably focused on it too. But at the end of the day, find a place where you can play football, where you're going to get taught and we're going to have fun playing football. And if the NFL is there for you, it'll be there for you no matter where you go. Pierre Garçon played at Mount Union in Division III level. If you're good enough, they'll come find you. And whether you're at Yale or Notre Dame, but you're going to have a much better chance playing at Yale than you would be not playing at Notre Dame. And I think Jay is a great kid. I'm happy for him. I think this is good for him. And I wish him nothing but success. I never have cared about Yale football ever. I will be watching box scores moving forward to see if Jay's getting a chance to play.
Sid Irish says Jay will have a great life, and that's what it matters. That's the be all end all. Is these are kids, and you just want them to be successful in whatever they want to do. And I completely agree with that sentiment.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I think that's it, Vince. Right? Are we wrapped up for today?
I'm going to throw one out there. One more. I know Joe Salvatore says the idea of Spindler and Fisher both starting on the left side scares me. I know they are good, but wouldn't it be better to have someone with experience paired up with them on the left side?
That's why I said I'd prefer to have Jarrett Patterson there. Yeah, I agree with that.
Completely agree with that.
But I also think the counter argument to that is, and we've made this one before, is I also think the notion of having a right side that is good. So if you were to put Patterson there or Kane Madden there, and you've got him and Lugg, and you've got veterans there, and you just know that right side is good, there's merit to that because then you can protect the left side. Whereas if you got two new starters on both sides, then you could maybe run into some risks where you're having some issues on both sides of the line with those young guys. So I think that's another part of it too that can factor into it is being able to say, hey, let's make sure we get us. We have to have a side that we know we can go behind. That's gotta happen too. So
we'll see what happens. But Brian, that is it.
Yeah, another long, great show. We're 3.5 hours in, and we have over 200 people in the chat right now. So I appreciate y'all very much. Again, we'll have something coming up here soon with a more formal announcement about the message board. I'm not telling y'all to go to it. If you have signed up, I'm so thankful and happy and appreciate you so much. There's going to be some kinks we got to work out, though. That's what I'm saying. Like, just to understand that we're still working through things, and you guys are sort of our guinea pigs to a certain degree, because we've tested it out as much as we can. But I think at this point in time, it's about making sure we've worked out all those kinks. And so understand that there's going to be some of that. And we appreciate it. And again, before you leave, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button at irishbreakdown.com. And of course, hit the notification bell, share this with your Notre Dame friends and family. And then we will be back as of right now. Our plan is to be back on Monday. And you never know, Vince, we may end up having 2 shows on Monday. Just might. But, we'll see. But everybody have a great, safe, wonderful weekend.
Yes.
Tell the people you love that you love them. Be safe. Check out irishbreakdown.com, and we will see you all again very, very soon.